Ready to go. Pan is joining by Zoom. Mary is in Paris, so good for her. All right, I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Hartford Selectboard on Tuesday, October 3rd, 2023 at 6 p.m. Very special meeting because we have our new town manager here for his first meeting. He has agreed that he will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, John. We have no business as the Liquor Control Board, no business as the Cannabis Control Board. Order of agenda, I think it looks pretty good. So we will go to public comment. We'll start with people in the room. Then hear from the people who are joining us on Zoom. If you'd like to comment, please walk up to the microphone. You'll have 5 minutes. Please identify yourself and your town or village of residence. No personal attacks, and that's about it. So the floor is open. We have any? Heidi coming up?
Yes, please. I apologize. Hasn't moved me, and I apologize. I'm sorry. I am logged in now. First off, I'd like to say that I'm Heidi new to White River Junction. I would like to welcome our new town manager. It's very nice to see you.
Thank you.
I come to most of the Selectboard meetings, have been for, I think it's in August of 19. I've been participating. I have a lot to say. I'm very interested in the safety and well-being of our town members, the rights and the regulations of our town members. I would also like to give a shout out to Public Works. I am very impressed with what they've done with Christian Street. I am very grateful with what they've done to Christian Street. It is a blessing. I am hoping it's not Christian River anymore. It has been a long time in the coming, so thank you very much. Another reason why I'm here tonight is because of the last select board meeting. A couple things happened at the last select board meeting that I do not feel were correct. I cannot find what I'm looking for on this. I just found it. A couple things happened. I did go to the Town of Hartford listserv, and I did go to what's happening Hartford, Vermont, question mark, the town Facebook page that I started for information for the town of Hartford residents and surrounding people. I do not believe that when the select board members came out of executive session that it was duly noted what you actually were taking a vote on. I believe that you violated Vermont statute. And I also believe that you have not only violated a Vermont statute, I believe that you have violated our town charter. I believe you have also violated your own general duties and goals as a select board. And if you could actually go to your own town page under general duties and goals of Hartford Selectboard members, please. So you can follow where I'm actually leading you. I would really highly appreciate
Please just,
that.
if you can read what's in there, that would be great. Thanks.
Where would we find this?
Yeah.
It's under government. and
Remember how you
select
have
board.
5 minutes, just so you know,
Um,
if you want to prioritize.
It says that you are to hire, evaluate, and manage the town manager. That does not give you the right to hire extra employees. You are allowed to hire the town manager. That does not give you the protocol to hire extra employees underneath our new town manager, as you did with coming out of executive session last week. Does not give you the right to extend any other evaluations of anything. And the other item that I would also like to address, as I see that I have 50 seconds left, is I would actually like to know how much of our tax-paying money has gone into this protocol, as you say, is going to be costing the taxpayers, as you stated in your email to another resident. What was the protocol and how much is this going to cost the taxpayers?
Okay, thanks, Heidi. First thing I would say, if you think that we violated open meeting law, there's a process for you to file a complaint. And if it's found out that we did, we will cure that. It sounds like your complaint is that we didn't explain fully what the agreement was. The agreement was to keep our finance director and HR director on for 2 months at a premium to provide onboarding services for our new town manager. So that's one. I just can't really agree with you on the charter. I'm sorry, it's just, if you look at the charter, it's full of language basically saying, like, you know, anything that's listed or written in there is not a limit or a restriction on our abilities to do what we can. So there's that. Like I said, you know, oh, and then if we want to know how much Gil and Paula are being paid, we can certainly get you that. I don't believe it's an additional expense. So the taxpayers, you know, they voted for the budget and it was approved. This money, I believe, comes out of the existing budget. So to that extent, I don't think it actually like costs the taxpayers anymore. But we appreciate that. If you want to file a complaint, please do so. We'll have our town attorney look at it and we'll take any measures that he deems appropriate if we have to cure the violation.
May I ask one more question?
One more question is fine, but we got.
Where was this protocol?
Where
and
I'm-
when was it actually proposed? Was it proposed so that the taxpayers may find it, or was this private between the
Well,
select
nothing's
board
really
and-
private between us. We had a proposal, essentially a contract to enter into 2 months of premium pay for onboarding services. We voted on it in public session. I imagine, like most of the documents that get introduced to us during meetings, that'll be on our agenda page or our minutes page on the website, if it's not already there.
So-
Please take a look at it.
So payroll and salaries should be open to the taxpayers, am I correct?
Yes, I just said we will get you the amounts if you'd like. There's no problem with that.
Absolutely.
I'm also saying I don't think it's an additional expense to taxpayers, like there's money in the budget that it's being allocated for. It's not costing them any extra. Yep.
I would just add, and I asked that very question, how much will this cost? I can send that to you when I find it another time, not this point. But we have allocated funds in the town manager salary budget that, like in previous times, that those funds have been allocated to be part of the town manager search, and as well with, so basically this is part of supporting the new town manager hire, which has been funded out of the town manager salary line item.
It would have been helpful if this had been explained to the taxpayers previously, because as we understand, he's well capable of handling himself.
Heidi, I work in HR. Onboarding is the key, absolutely, to any successful hire. You have to have those services so that John can come in, know everybody, know how Hartford operates, make sure he has access to everything that he needs, and frankly, to know the history. You know, someone will come up to him on the street and be like, hey, what about the park and ride? He's not going to know what that means unless he's gotten some onboarding. So, you know, we are absolutely committed to his success as the new town manager. We're not going to make the mistakes that we made last time. We're going to make sure that he has all the resources that he needs going forward. I'd also like to just say, if anyone's listening, there was a rumor that when we agreed to this contract for onboarding services, that we somehow created a new assistant acting town manager position. That was fueled by a listserv post that was incorrect. That's false information. We did not create a new position.
And I made that correction because that's how I understood it, because you were not very clear and concise when you came out of executive session, and that's how it appeared to the public.
Public is always welcome to reach out to me. They know how to contact me if they have questions about something that we did. It would be great if they reached out ahead of time before posting incorrect information. So we will now, Lanny?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I've had a couple inquiries from citizens about this. So I reached out to Vermont League of Cities and Towns, spoke to Kyle Romanoff up there, who was a staff attorney, Vermont League of Cities and Towns. And he stated to me that on their agenda, it didn't spell out what we were going to be voting on. He said, open meeting law does not contain a definition of agenda. That being said, is it clear from the intent of the law that an agenda must be drafted so that it provides actual notice of the specific topics to be addressed and the actions that may be taken at that meeting? An agenda should include specific topics such as proposed contract with ambulance service or discussion of speed limit on Town Highway 7, rather than general terms such as contract or speed limits, which should not provide notice to the public about what will be discussed and decided. There's also been brought to my attention that in reference to what Ms. Dudo said for open meeting law, for electronic participation by open meeting law states that at the beginning of every meeting, we're supposed to make notice of who is on Zoom, and also whether they're able to hear the venue and whether the venue is able to hear them, which we have not been doing, nor did we do at that meeting. Open meeting law also states quite clearly that if there is a vote that is taken that is not a unanimous decision, the roll needs to be taken via a roll call, which had not been done at that meeting. Nor has it been done for many meetings that we've had votes that have taken place via electronic participation. So it's clear that we have been in violation of open meeting law. One of the ways that we could correct this going forward is that for the attendance portion, I believe that we should take attendance and we should say who is on Zoom, and we should ask them if they're able to hear us, and whether we should state whether we can hear them. That would solve that issue. The other thing we need to do going forward is to make sure that we follow open meeting law and take the vote by roll call versus just saying it's in support, because that was not taken at that point in time. But I also, as I said, wanted to read VLCT's response to my question.
Thank you, Lanny. Those are all great ideas. We'll certainly benefit going forward from your research.
Full disclosure, so I was not there for this final portion of the meeting. I missed the executive session for a family commitment. It does seem, what I'm gathering, I would have voted in support of it. And what I am gathering, though, is that maybe we as the select board can improve on some of these procedural things that Lanny's bringing up. I do think it's part of a broader conversation that we should have as a select board. This is maybe I guess I can.
Let's do it. Select board comment.
Sure. Okay.
Great. Thanks, Rocket. Any other comment in the room? Okay. We have anyone on Zoom? Okay.
Two hands up at the moment. Michelle, go ahead.
Hi there, this is Michelle Boleski, White River Junction. I just want to say that I did watch the last portion of that movie, sorry, the video of the last select board meeting, and I was very, very confused about what you were voting on and what the proposal was. And so I did email to ask. However, there was no document. I looked through all the records, and there was no document attached to the agenda that I could find that referenced what you voted on. So, yes, I think it is a good idea to onboard the new town manager, particularly since we've had a lot of issues. But I don't know what the protocol or process is. Is that something that you would ask him when he started, if that's something he would like to include him in the decision? So that's that. So I was just a little concerned about that, and that the actual document was very vague. So I personally would like to see a little bit more detail in a contract or a proposal. And again, you know that I've complained about protocol and process with this acting select board. And the fact that, yes, rumors start because you guys are transparent and good about communicating. And that is something you all need to work on as a board, because it doesn't have to, rumors don't have to start. Things don't have to bubble up if there is transparency and clear information and adherence to your own procedures and protocol. So, and I've read them and I've shared them with you guys numerous times. So I would hope going forward that you might maybe take time to actually monitor or do a rubric of your own performance as a board and see where you can make improvements, because that would really help everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Another hand up.
Yes, and Marie, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Marie Elvin, White River. I sent you all an email and I just wanted to check in about the, if there has been any conversation with DPW about the back fence on the park and ride. And I asked about the flashing light, if we could have one of those up there, and also look at a camera for that park and ride. And I didn't know if anybody has talked about that or just kind of checking in on that.
Yeah, Marie, so I think you mentioned last meeting, I'll have to check with DPW, but they were waiting essentially, there's like a lot of vegetation by the back fence. And they were waiting to basically for it to wither away and then take a look and see what was possible up there. So I think we're still waiting on that. The camera and the flashing light, we haven't really discussed. I don't know if there's a recommendation from either DPW or public safety about that, but we'll certainly see if there is.
Yeah, I really think that should be a definite goal. I mean, to get that done. And I was talking to somebody that lives on the top of the hill, and they said they've almost got hit twice by someone trying to run the stoplight. So there is, so certainly the park and ride and that. Just wanted to check in on that, and also put a shout out for the senior center. I know there's a lot of money floating around and everybody's got these projects and everything's wonderful, but sometimes the things that really need to get done don't seem to be getting done. They're going to bigger projects instead of taking care of some of these projects that have been needed to be addressed for a long time. And I do welcome the new town manager. I look forward to meeting him and showing him around up here on Hartford Avenue. Hopefully we can all have a great success with you. I'm hopeful. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marie. Speaking of the Bugby Senior Center, we did allocate money for like an architectural survey to see what kind of improvements could be made in the functionality of the building. And so I think that's still out. We're waiting for it to come back in with the recommendations. But so we're not forgetting the Senior Center.
Great, thank you.
Yep, thanks, Marie. Any other hands up?
Dan has his hand up.
Okay, Dan.
Go ahead, Dan.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up a little bit on Lanny's comment. I'm not sure if he was asking about who was on Zoom, meaning residents or meaning select board members, but that is, if it's select board members, that's documented in the meeting minute notes. And I do believe that every vote is either that Lana lists it either as unanimous or who votes in which way. So that should already be documented. We can follow up on another way if we need to, but I think we're already doing that, but I'm not 100% sure.
Thank you, Dan. Any other hands up on Zoom? Okay, we will go to select board comments and announcements. Kim, you want to kick us off?
Sure, and I wanted to add, I think I mentioned this before, the planning commission has a script at the beginning of their meetings that does incorporate all of the things that Laney suggested, so
Sure.
I don't think we need to reinvent that wheel if you want to incorporate it. It's a pretty smooth script that they use.
Good.
And certainly welcome to John. I think we're all very excited to have you here, and I know it's a steep learning curve, and it just thanks for being here. And I also just wanted to say that the VLCT is launching another version 2.0 of the Welcoming and Engaging Communities cohort that I participated in last year. And they are basically, I'll be sending out an invite to other board members and to the town manager, as well as so they've also decided to incorporate. Last year it was up to 2 members from each town, and there were 8 towns that participated in a program that there's no charge to the town. It's provided from Vermont League of Cities and Towns. It's a wonderful program. They're expanding it a bit. They're trying to incorporate some members who participated previously, and then also ideally it's a representative of the board, potentially a town manager, and a department head. So I'll be sending out that information for anyone that might be interested. It does cross over from January into, I think, April or May. So it would probably be best for incumbent board members who are not up for re-election in March, if anyone's interested in participating. But I will send that information.
Thanks, Kim. Dan, do you have any select board comment?
No, not this time, thanks.
All right, thank you. So Mary is in Paris, as I mentioned. Ally?
Just also echoing, welcome, John. It's great to have you.
Rocket?
John, welcome. If it gives the citizens of Hartford any confidence or comfort, John comes heavily recommended from some great people I know from the western side of Vermont. So both on the select board over in Pittsburgh and in the regional planning commission over there. So glad to have you here, and please let us know how we can support you. I want to congratulate downtown Bill Brown, one of our citizens here. I saw on the SIGAX that he was awarded the 2023 Friend Award at some statewide Parks and Rec award nomination. So I think that's a great thing that we have. And actually, I have a personal anecdote, which is that I have a friend who had a slip and fall in our town trails last year, and who was there but downtown Bill Brown. So I thought that was very fitting. I want to just comment briefly on procedure. I know we've had a lot of conversation about that. I don't think we need to go too far, but I do think it's important for us to recognize that it's possible to overcorrect by doing procedures on procedures or procedures for procedures. Personally, if we start our meetings by checking if we can hear every single citizen on Zoom and they can be heard, it's going to gum up the meeting process so much that it will make it even longer than the meetings already are. So if we reach that point of procedural red tape, I would actually be in preference of just moving to in person. If we, of course, can keep the accessibility and the transparency, then I think that would be great. But I think we need to be expedient. And on that note, I've had a couple private conversations so far with select board members, and I'd like to engage more select board members as well as the public in ways that we can fine tune our meeting process, especially now that we have a new town manager. I think it should be an aberration that our meetings go beyond 2 hours. To me, yes, we have a big town, and yes, we have a lot to cover. But I think in the last year and a half since I've been on the board, we've filled a lot of staffing gaps throughout the ranks at Hartford staff, especially the department head level. And now with the new town manager, I think that it would be worthwhile of having a public conversation about how we as a select board learn to trust their expertise and work more efficiently, because I think it's prohibitive for people to participate in our meetings if they're over 2 hours long. And I think it is incredibly discouraging for anyone who might want to run and compete for one of these seats to serve if our meetings are too long. So I think maybe there's ways that we can improve that. I'm certainly open to suggestions from anyone here, anyone in the public, but I expect that to be something that I start looking forward to creating some movement on. There was one other thing. That's it, maybe. Anyway, it's an honor to serve this town. Thank you for having me.
You Rocket. Lanny?
Yeah, I think you maybe misinterpreted what I said, Rocket. Vermont state law with open meeting law only states that members of the body need to identify that they're on
I see.
Zoom.
Okay.
And they need to signify that, just the members of the body need to signify that they can hear the meeting and that the meeting can hear them.
I see, that's doable.
And that has to be done publicly,
Okay.
not just in minutes.
Thank
So that was what I was saying. So we don't have to go to everybody in the audience. So I had the pleasure of going to VOCT Town Fair, this last town fair. I only went for one day, but I gained a lot just out of one day. And one of the biggest things that I have for takeaway from town fair is that we as a board in this town is failing. And the reason why we're failing is we're not leveraging the power of a local option tax, which was proposed by the charter committee that we had last time. And this board failed to bring up the charter and take it forward. There was a great discussion about the local option tax and what it can do for your community. We have some improvements, and they're major improvements that we could do for this town. We're going to hear later on about a fire station. We're going to hear later on about a police station. And we could use the power of local option taxes, 1%, to help fund these projects. And we're failing by not taking advantage of that. I also did have a chance to sit down with Kyle Romanoff up there, who I spoke of earlier. And I had a really good discussion with him about open meeting law. And I gained some good perspective of that. And he filled me in a lot of things that I had some misinterpretations of as well. But I am, as you all know, I'm a very strong advocate of the transparency. And that's why I did some research and I called him up and talked to him about this last episode we had. So that's basically all I had. I did have the pleasure of stopping in and seeing John on Monday afternoon and welcoming me on board. And it was a pleasure to be able to do that. So thank you.
Thanks, Lanny. I'd also like to welcome John. And just to note, the next meeting, we are taking up the charter, which does include in its draft form local option tax. So more to come. All right, Kim.
Can I just add on, because one of the things that I learned at the that capital planning forum back in, I think it was March, was that 1% retail sales tax, if we add it, includes online sales. So
Yes.
there's mechanisms which I thought was would obviously be a substantial.
Yeah, we're talking about a boatload of money that we could utilize for budgets. And the problem that towns have is crafting how to use that money, the percentages that should go before the taxpayers versus should be used by the select board. And that's the struggle and the high wire that towns have to work with when they look at the local option tax.
Okay, Lanny.
Dominic Cloud put on a presentation about that.
Move on here. So appointments, none. Significant activity report. Any questions about the significant activity report? Anyone? Okay.
Just, and I don't think, I thought Gail was going to join us online, but I don't see her. But just for finance, I think we're probably close to like a quarterly update. So I'd just like to put in a request for this will be the end of the first quarter, would have ended September 30th. So Gail's probably already got that on the docket, but just doing that.
A couple things I'd like to just
Sure,
highlight if I
absolutely.
could. Well, obviously, you've read the report or have access to it. I would like to congratulate Michael Martin on receiving his Water 3 license from the state. I'd like to point out that Trailblazers Green Construction Training has wrapped up with significant participation in a graduation ceremony. These trainings are helping Hartford meet the climate economy goals in the Climate Action Plan. There is also a possibility of energy audits for the municipal building, and DPW administrative building and WABA have also been approved for energy audits. Vermont Clean Cities Coalition is starting to hold EV trainings for mechanics in Vermont. Their first trainings will be October 25th and 26th. The department is seeking individuals, the rec department is seeking individuals interested in working part-time at the Wendell A. Barwood Arena, WABA, this coming season. Apply at hartford.com. Police Department, new hires. Officer Simon Keeling has completed his field training program. Congratulations to him. New officer Peter Maziars has completed the 2-week part-time academy class, and training has begun his field training. Officer Siren, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, attended and completed Vermont Police Academy firearms instruction course and will be HPD's newest firearms instructor. Officers Bennett, Hernandez, Angulo, and Keeling attended the Street Cops Training Vermont case law in Ludlow, Vermont. And I believe finally, the fire department has just posted a vacancy in their department looking for a town firefighter / AEMT/paramedic. The job description is posted at www.hartford-vermont.org.
Thanks, John. Any other questions on the SIGAX?
Oh, I just want to thank Fire Chief, Police Chief. The formatting is great. It's much easier to read, and it's really helpful just to see it categorically broken down like that. So, thank you, and thanks for your service.
Okay, all right, so we're going to move on to board reports, motions, and ordinances. So our next 2 items are presentations by groups that responded to our community safety RFP. Like last time, each group will get half an hour. We kind of like it if it's 15 minutes of presentation and 15 minutes for Q&A. We all have our list of Q&A questions because we're going to make sure that everyone gets asked the same questions. And other than that, I think we can kick it off. The first one is CRG.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, before we start this, I just want to remind the select board members that when you give me your assessment of each criteria for them, if they're all the same, we're not going to have very good results. So just bear that in mind. I mean, there are excellences and there's pluses and minuses to every presentation. So
thanks, Lanny. We'll make a note of that. All right, we'll turn it over. You just want to introduce yourselves, and then the floor is yours. And
wonderful. Thank you for inviting us. My name is Monica Weber. I'm the Executive Director of the Crime Research Group.
And I'm Christopher Loris, a Research Associate with Crime Research Group.
Wonderful. And I'm just getting, I believe, permission to be able to share my presentation.
Okay,
so
sure.
Just, hoping my technology works there. Yeah, beautiful. Okay, there we go. So, so thank you again for inviting us. We're very pleased to be here this evening to just walk through the proposal that we submitted to you earlier in the year. First, I just want to give a little overview about the Crime Research Group and who we are. Sure. We are a Vermont-based nonprofit organization. We've been in existence as a nonprofit as Crime Research Group since 2014. However, we do have a long history serving Vermont, as we were initially called the Vermont Center for Justice Research, and we were based at Norwich University and have been serving the state since 1987, really providing a variety of work and service to the state of Vermont. In particular, our job is to collect and analyze justice information, to provide information to and reports and statistics on criminal justice to state agencies, to departments, to community members, to legislators, to towns and other departments. And generally to assist in the creation of evidence-based practice and policy in the criminal justice system. So again, that's our mission and vision there, really sort of encourages that we have an evidence-informed, we promote a fair and effective justice system, and really we're working to strengthen the justice system, reduce and prevent crime and recidivism, achieve safer and healthier communities, and ensure justice, fairness, and equal treatment under the law. We are a small team. However, we have a lot of expertise in a variety of areas. As the executive director of the Crime Research Group, my role really is to sort of oversee all of the administration of the organization. And as it relates to this particular project, be leading some of the specific strategies that I'll talk about a little bit more when we get into the details of that approach. Also on our team is Dr. Robin Joy. She is the director of research. Her expertise and experience in Vermont, quite honestly, is really unparalleled in terms of the number of projects, the experience she has with the communities, the data analysis, her deep understanding of the justice system from law enforcement all the way through the judiciary and into corrections. Also here to my right is Chris Loris. He's a research associate. Some of you may have known Chris as the 5-term mayor of Rutland. He served in the House of Representatives for a term. Effective leader, leading Project Vision in Rutland, those of you who aren't aware of that. And so he really just has extensive experience creating transparent systems, particularly related to law enforcement and policing. And just disclosure for all of you, Chris is also, as separate and aside from his role in the Crime Research Group, a governor's appointee to the Vermont Criminal Justice Council. So he does have that experience as well.
And that's full disclosure.
Right.
Because I won't be wearing that hat during this process.
Correct. That's correct. So we just want to make you aware of that. I'm sure some of you know about Chris's experience there. And then Megan Novak, who is a research associate with our team. Megan has really extensive experience with qualitative research, survey design, interviewing, analysis. And so, we'll be bringing like all of the skills and experience that our team has to bear on this project. In addition, we just wanted to make you aware of the equity statement. I don't necessarily need to read it to you, but I just want you to know that when we're conducting our research, it's very important to us that we bring an unbiased and impartial methodology, recognizing the systemic racism that is throughout the criminal justice system. So we design projects that are really contribute to the understanding of the policies and processes that result in disparate treatment of people of color and other marginalized groups. And we really do believe, and I think in this project in particular, it's very important that telling the data stories of those who have been affected by the criminal justice system are really shared. So it's very important to us in lots of reports. We're just unable to share a lot of information about certain subjects of people because there are so many low numbers in Vermont, and we really do sort of hide those numbers so people can't be identified. So we really advocate talking to people, and I think that is another big part of what this project is about. So we'll get into the approach and go through a little bit of what our process would look like if you were to engage us in the work. We have basically 4 main strategies that we'll be using. Prior to implementing any of these strategies, I think it's important to understand that we would expect to be working with some sort of a project team that the town would put together, having a lead person at the town to work with us and provide that kind of support. Using the town website and other information like distribution lists and posting to the community forums, et cetera, so we can get information out about the project. But the main way that we would go about collecting data, I think is the way we would describe it, is first we would start with some stakeholder interviews. And the purpose of this would be to just have a one-on-one conversation with key stakeholders in the geographic areas that make up this town of Hartford, and ask them and get information from them about what's important for us to study, what are the things that we need to know, what are the best ways to do community outreach, and sort of create this foundation for the rest of the work moving forward. The next, and I think really exciting and part of this process are the community meetings that we propose. So our idea is that we would have 3 community meetings. So we would hold them in different parts of the region in geographically accessible places. We would make sure we would schedule them at times for people to be able to attend. And the model that we would use is the results-based accountability model. And this is a really excellent model. It's data-driven, and it's a way to engage people in having a conversation about a particular topic. And this topic is, what does health and safety mean for the town of Hartford? What's our vision for what that looks like? And then establishing that vision, and then identifying indicators for what it would look like. And then assessing, well, what's the gap? Who's not actually achieving that vision right now? And then starting to work through, what do we need to do to change? What are the strategies that would work? Who are the partners that would have a role to play in helping us achieve the vision that we've outlined? So we would have 3 of those meetings. We would be collecting all of that information. And then we would also propose having 1 virtual meeting for anyone who was unable to attend an in-person meeting, and having that conversation online. So we would gather information from those meetings and combine all of those, summarize that, and provide a report back to the town about what the recommendations were. Additionally, we will conduct several surveys. So we'll conduct a community survey open to anyone in the community. We would do that online. We would also create paper surveys for those people who it might be difficult for them to fill out an online survey in order to be able to reach people who don't traditionally have access to a computer. And it would follow the similar path of the community meeting, sort of asking questions, giving people an opportunity to weigh in. Obviously, the structure of their survey would be a little bit different because this is going to be a individual type of instrument. And then the second survey is a specific workforce survey. I believe the RFP really asked to focus in particularly on the police and what challenges and barriers they may face to policing in the town. So we would develop that workforce survey and also include the fire department. I know that wasn't part of the RFP, but we thought that would be important as well. So those would be surveys where we would collect this information. Additionally, we would have one other meeting. I didn't really put it on here in terms of our approach, but we would also have a multidisciplinary meeting that would cover sort of the town services and also other community services. Who are the main players that need to collaborate in order to respond to the issues that are coming up in the surveys and the town meetings, and work towards understanding the challenges and the barriers to that collaboration, and try and come up with some strategies for how we would improve that system. We'd likely use the sequential intercept model to kind of work through that and give people a place in the model just to see how that works. And then also we would plan to do some data analysis. As I mentioned earlier, a significant part of our work is analyzing criminal justice data in Vermont. So we would specifically hone in on crime trends in the town. We would analyze those crime trends, provide insights. We make a particular effort to break down that data by race to the degree that we can, and with the information that we have available to us. We pull information from the National Incident-Based Reporting System. We'll also look at the online data that's already provided by the town in terms of calls and service. We know that that's already available. And use that information in the conversations that we'll be having with people. Just pause there, Chris. Anything you want to Ed?
I think not. I think you're doing a really good job presenting.
Okay, really good job. Being very clear and also
Yes.
trying not to take up a significant amount of time, just to.
Yeah,
we can get the
I'd say
questions.
examples would normally be offered, but due to the constraints of the time,
Yeah, sure.
we need to get on
Okay.
with it and get the Q&A.
So the timeline we propose, 12 to 16 months. I would say a lot of that probably depends on weather in some cases. But the way we would think about it, the first quarter, once there was a contract signed, we would obviously have sort of a kickoff and planning meeting. We would start to build our community outreach, particularly focusing on the key stakeholder interviews. Then we would start to work on the community meetings, those 3 meetings and the virtual meetings using the results-based accountability model, and beginning and putting together crime data analysis, which I think go essentially, through the project. In the third quarter, we would administer the surveys that I discussed and have that system analysis meeting. I think that system analysis meeting would really be helpful after we've had the community meetings. I think it'd be really informative for that particular meeting. That's why I put it more towards the end of the project. And then in the last quarter, we'll be analyzing and reporting. Probably should have drawn a line through that now that I'm looking at it visually, but throughout this, I would also be having lots of interaction with the project team at the town and providing information back and forth and updates, just so we know how things are going, what are the challenges we're having, really trying to work through things so that we don't experience any delays in the project. So that's the timeline, and the proposal, I didn't put it in here, but the cost that we submitted to you all is for this work is $75,000. That mostly includes all of CRG's time, and it wouldn't include anything such as the town's time or any costs that the town might incur for the project.
Great.
So that's our presentation.
Wonderful. So we have some questions, 5 questions.
Okay.
And we'll all, I think, just take turns asking them, but I'll start. Could you share more about your experience working with rural communities and how you would apply what you've learned from that experience to working with Hartford?
Sure. Well, I think we are a Vermont-based organization, thankfully, and we've worked with lots of communities in Vermont, and we have worked with Hartford in the past. I know that as CRG, we worked with Hartford on the traffic stop and race data project. All of our studies really incorporate Vermont and the rural nature of Vermont. So we understand the way, particularly from a data perspective, how data can impact rural communities differently because of the low numbers that exist. And so it's our intention to really be very aware of those connections and relationships and privacy and confidentiality issues that might exist in a rural community, and really listening to what people in the community are telling us.
And if I can,
Absolutely.
if I can jump an example, and I can speak to this because while I was the mayor in Rutland City, we did engage with then the Vermont Center for Justice Research to help with our data-driven approach to criminal activity in the city, and incorporated a lot of community partners in that process. I believe that your police chief, who the Vermont Center for Justice Research, we worked with the PD, and at that point, then Commander Sheldon and Sergeant Sheldon had a lot of input into the work we were doing with the now crime research group. So as far as the rural nature, I would tend to say that outside of Chittenden County, all of Vermont is rural, and any of the work that was done by Vermont Center for Justice Research and now crime research group beyond the confines of Chittenden County, we have the capacity and the experience to work with rural Vermont communities to affect the data-driven approach to solving problems
Right.
in the criminal justice world.
Right, I think it's always our approach to build partnerships and have relationships with people in the communities, and so we would expect to be here and to do that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Ellen?
Hi, thanks for being here.
Hi.
How will you reach members of our community who may not be engaged or who may be historically excluded from municipal activities and resources?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think that really also comes back to working with partners, and we'll be exploring that in the key stakeholder interviews. I think it's really, we need to understand in this area who is considered marginalized, who is hard to reach, who hasn't been engaged in these processes and why, and then start to build maybe an advisory group. So there's a project we're working on currently where we have set up an advisory group for that specific reason, because we're trying to reach out to a particular target group that we don't actually have relationships with, but we know that if we worked with this other advisory group, they could help us really establish that relationship and be a bridge. And that's been a very successful model for us in the past to do that. And I would expect that we would use that model in this process.
And part of that is using the folks within this community, that advisory group, to figure out where those marginalized folks are and how we can reach them in your community, and then go to them. And examples are, with this other project working on, the way we work with you as well, is sometimes municipal buildings folks won't show up at. We found that in Rutland over and over and over again through some of the initiatives that we undertook in the world of public safety. And we've had internal discussions about how we're going to reach out to and ensure that those groups, first of all, feel like they're coming to a safe space. They're people who don't want to go to a municipal town hall here, but they would go to the recreation department. And so talking to the team and to you folks, we'll find out where those, if you will, third spaces are that the community feels comfortable at. And then we just need to find ways to get them there. And that will be through, there are different models, and we really have a top-notch qualitative researcher who, as part of this project, that's Megan, who knows how to do that work and reaching those individuals.
And also related, I think, a good example is, what are the words, what are the images that we might use if we're going to sort of put up a poster or make some sort of a flyer to invite people to a community meeting, and running it past the people who we really want to attend and ask them for their feedback. Is this welcoming? Is this going to bring you into this space? The project we're working on now is a good example. We made a poster that we liked, and we showed it to our advisory group, and they just told us it was a really bad poster. And they gave us really good advice on how to make it better. So that's what we would do in this case as well.
Question. Do your proposal costs include compensation or other incentives for community members to participate in the engagement process?
Yeah, so it doesn't, because our proposal doesn't really include one-on-one surveys or interviews. So we don't include incentives to fill out the survey, the online survey, or the paper survey. We're expecting most of the participation to come at those community meetings, and so we didn't include any incentives or costs for that.
Can I ask a follow-up on that? So not only for people responding, but for if you form an advisory group of people that might be more capable of engaging with that. So it's
Right,
not, basically you're saying.
Basically, we don't, although, I think that, again, budgets are always, we can always look at that and think about whether or not if that's something to the town that we would need to change.
And that is a method that is currently being used in that other
Yes.
project that Monica had described
Yes.
for you that there are incentives there.
Yes, so it is something that
So
we're,
it's not like.
we're
it-
familiar with doing
Yes.
that. Yeah. Thank you, Chris.
Just got it. Someone asked
Sure,
a question, please.
Can you describe what your stakeholder interview process would look like? And maybe also, can you give examples of some interview questions?
Well, we don't have the interview questions developed because we're not, we want to do that in collaboration. But of course, we'll be, sort of starting with understanding who are the formal and informal leaders in this area, and really intending to reach out to those people. So sometimes it's a little bit more clear who the formal leaders are, but not so much who the informal leaders are. And that's who we really want to reach for our key stakeholder interviews. And then asking them about this project, about the goals, their understanding of the goals for the project. Thinking about safety, what does safety mean to them? Questions along those lines, but we certainly don't have those questions defined yet because I think it was too early, and we want to do that in a collaborative process.
And I would say one example would be that I had experience with, and I apologize because Monica and I did not discuss these in advance, so she's going to be surprised as you are by my answer. But an example of a neighborhood surveys that we completed in Rutland are an example of, do you feel safe in your neighborhood where you live? Do you feel safe in the city or town center? Those type of questions may be the ones that we would pursue, but it's really going to be built on what the community wants and the community needs. You know yourselves what the challenges are in the community and what the strengths are within the community, and we will tap into that so we can reach out to your community and perform those surveys and have those interviews.
Yeah. The other thing I will add is the results-based accountability model has a set of questions that are built into the model that are designed to allow for a very rich conversation, and we'll tailor those questions. So the first one is, like I said, it's around sort of what's your vision, but the vision is really going to be specifically what's your vision for a safe and healthy Hartford, and we'll just keep diving into it from there when we're at the community meetings, and the surveys will kind of parallel those. The key stakeholder interviews are more around us gathering background information to move forward.
It's a great time.
We have one more question.
Yeah.
If there's any time over, we'll let the other group. Okay. So.
Our last question is, how would you handle situations in which respondents are not comfortable answering personal questions?
Sure. Well, I think this is where, as a research organization, we would certainly excel and have a lot of experience here. We have experience talking with victims of crime. We have experience talking with people in difficult situations. And first, I just want to be clear that nobody has to speak to us, right? It's always going to be up to them. And as researchers, we really do prepare in advance for situations where we'll be talking with someone about what they might consider difficult for them. And so, as Chris was mentioning, we care about where interviews are held. So we'll be looking at spaces to make sure that they're comfortable. We'll design our process to make sure that we minimize potential risks to participants. So we'll inform them about what's going to happen before the meeting actually starts. We'll let them know ahead of time that they don't have to answer any questions or participate in any particular part of the meeting if they're at the community meetings. And we'll also work to sort of minimize shows of town authority when that makes sense as well, to give people a sense of safety and really being able to say, we're talking to researchers, we're collecting information for the benefit of the town and wanting to make sure that everyone feels comfortable to the degree that they can. I also think, since we're not conducting one-on-one stakeholder interviews or focus groups, it's a it's a little bit different, but we will be applying all of that research methodology that we have to this particular process.
Thank you very much. That was all of our questions. We appreciate you coming here and
Yeah, thank you for
speaking
inviting
with
us.
us
We
tonight.
appreciate it. Thank you.
And I gotta say, John Heverstock, when I was serving in Rutland, he was 7 miles north, and you got a good one. So congratulations.
Thank you very much. That's very
Thank
kind
you.
of you. I always enjoyed my time in Rut Vegas.
Can we say that, Chief?
All right, great. So next we'll hear from Strategy Matters. So if you'd like to come up and same idea, about half an hour, a few minutes over maybe since the prior group had a couple extra minutes. Yeah, and if we could do maybe 15 or so for the presentation and 15 for Q&A, that would be great.
Sounds great. Sure, thanks. I'm gonna pass you paper copies of these slides.
Sure, thank
Instead
you.
of putting them up there, because actually we kind of had a conversation. with you.
That is a huge help.
Okay. And we have a couple extras.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, if you just want to introduce yourselves and then the floor is yours.
Great, thank you. Let me start. I'm Liz O'Connor. I'm the principal and founder of Strategy Matters, and also thanks for inviting us. We're super excited to be here and have this conversation with you. I really like your presentation. And I have a lot of ideas, like I kind of want to catch you in the hall on your way out and talk about, like whoever gets this gig, can we just like have a conversation? So we're a little different. And I think I'll let Josh introduce himself first, and then I'll get into who we are as a company. So I'm the principal and founder and principal consultant,
Sure.
and you are?
Yep, thanks, Liz. I'm Josh Moulton, and I'm a senior consultant and director at our organization. And I actually kind of split time between Amherst, Mass, which was an easy commute for me, and Boston, which is a little less easy, and then Southern Mexico, which is a lot less easy. So this worked out great. I happen to be 2 hours away instead of 2 days away. So glad to be here, and thanks for the invite.
Great.
Yeah, good. So our company, I founded Strategy Matters in 2000 after about 10 years in the Boston Police Department, where I was a civilian strategic planner. And while I was there, I became very interested in what I have come to think of as chronic public problems. And chronic public problems are anything where none of us actually own it, and all the money in the world actually doesn't solve it, because it requires behavioral change on everyone's part to make a difference. Affordable housing, education, public safety, you name it. You're all the stuff you talk about every day is probably in the realm of chronic public problems. And my question when I left the police department was, how do I bring whatever I know about strategic planning and community engagement and community relationships, particularly at that time with police, to a bigger effort around chronic public problems and really making some sort of headway in helping people approach them differently and solve them differently. So we've spent 23 years doing that. Josh joined 7 years ago, and since he joined, I feel more confident saying we are sort of an applied philosophy firm. The reason that's important is I think we tend to approach everything at the top level of theory and philosophical engagement. Sort of what is this about? And I think when Josh talks about our approach, you'll hear him talk about what do we even mean by public safety? What does this community want to make public safety about? What are you trying to accomplish here? Because you can make a lot of reforms in the criminal legal system and really screw it up, make it worse. In fact, we had a project a couple of years ago with our juvenile correctional system, where we saw that the trend line in juveniles in what we call hardware secure jail, incarcerated young people, was going like this, but the racial disparities in who was incarcerated were going up. So we have a sort of a great outcome, less young people in jail, and a really terrible outcome exactly at the same time by exactly the same efforts, increased racial disparities. So weighing those two things against one another seems like the wrong idea. And so what we want to do is find solutions to problems that don't have that unintended negative consequence as an outcome. So that's what I mean about applied philosophy. We're here to help you ask the right questions and help you answer those questions in ways which can guard against those kinds of harms while still getting you those kinds of benefits. Since founding the company, we've stayed with public safety. I am really fascinated actually by the policing function, in particular public safety more broadly, as our whole nation is trying to figure out what that might look like. And I think the relationship between police and community is at the heart of what makes policing work or not work. And if you don't have the professional legitimacy, like you have a corrupt department, or you have people who are incompetent or poorly trained, that's one kind of problem. Another kind of problem, harder actually to solve, is community confidence and trust that when they pick up the phone and call their public safety officials, they will get an answer that leads to justice. And in many of our public systems, we have people not picking up the phone because they don't trust that their community can respond and make something better. Child welfare systems are full of this. We have lots of people not calling child welfare systems because they're worried about what happens to the kid after that. I feel policing is on its way there. Our office is in Dorchester, in Boston. There was a bike theft out of our backyard. The neighbors decided not to call the police because they've seen national news about police shooting innocent people. So that's a bike, not worth the risk. We don't want that. I don't think you have that here. Pretty sure that that's not happening here. I'm looking at you, right? I heard somebody call you chief, so I hope that's not happening here, right? Okay. But I think what we really want to be paying attention to is that relationship. All that dynamism in the community policing, community public safety relationship is critical to both prevention, early intervention, and effective enforcement. And ineffective enforcement may be, one of the worst problems we could have. So that's how we think about it. Over those 23 years, we've also worked in many other kinds of systems. We work in arts and culture, we work in education, we work in the private sector. I've grown particularly fond of construction. Some would speculate is not unlike policing, male dominated, sort of can be quite hierarchical and involves life and death situations. So, there's a lot of crossover, but I think that's actually one of our differentiating benefits to you is that we're pretty comfortable in a lot of different settings. And we speak a lot of sort of sectoral languages, which can be pretty useful. We also had the unfair advantage of hearing all of your questions. And so I'm going to refrain from talking about things I know you're going to ask us, but there are some relevant stories in here. At first I thought you guys had it good for the first, but then I was like, oh, questions are all the same. So I'm just going to admit my privilege here. I think that's probably, I could go on. It's my company. It's been 23 years. I got a lot of things to say, but let me pause there and let Josh talk about our approach to this project and how we hope to be helpful to Hartford.
Great. Thanks, Liz. Appreciate that. So the approach that we wanted to use, we have 5 steps that we'd like to take. And I'll kind of walk through what each of those 5 steps will look like. So the first one is establishing what we call a process management team, or PMT for short. So there's some important things about this group at the beginning. So we want to make sure that we have people essentially that are going to represent diversity of perspective on issues that are local here. Diversity of issues, diversity of experiences, diversity of personal identity, if that's possible in this case. So what we'd be thinking of is a group of somewhere between 3 to 5, could be a little bit larger if there's enough interest. We'd want this to be some town employees, possibly some community members if there's community-based organizations that kind of intersect with work that happens in public safety. They might be great candidates as well. I know you asked a question about compensating groups, and that's something we can talk about later. But the first step that we want to take is really putting together a group that we could use to collaborate and make sure that we've got the right goals for the process, and to be really kind of explicit about what the goals for the process are. I know you want to come out of this with a set of recommendations, maybe a vision for what community safety looks like in your community. But there's also, if we're working with you for a number of months, we have opportunities to create some of the types of change that you're looking for while we're doing the process, right? So potentially helping to onboard a new town manager, things like that are things that you can use a process like this to be a vehicle for. And so we want to know that right at the front end of the process. Like, what are some things that we can do to help you move the direction that you want to move while we're taking each of the steps in this process? So think about it as a mechanism for change that starts really on day one. So that's why it's really important that we have the right group of people to advise us in the process. So first step is just getting this group together. Again, 3 to 5 members, maybe representatives from each department that's involved, some community members of various sorts, maybe some of you. So that would be the first step. And this group would really be leaning on we would be respectful of time. We don't want to introduce a second job for folks, but we'd want to, again, spend some time making sure that we're really explicit about goals for the process. get initial thoughts about where there are barriers to engagement and potential opportunities to, to do more or better with engagement. And start to surface what might be tensions or strategic issues that could come up throughout the course of the engagement. So that's step one. And then from there, we go into developing an engagement plan. And, during this phase, what we'd be doing is working with this process management team to figure out, again, what are the ways where you've seen successful engagement happen here in these communities, and where have you seen barriers? And then try to get a little bit more clear about, the nature of the barriers and what we might do to kind of get around them. One of the things that we want to be really careful about too, I think in a process like this, is that we're not just showing up, asking questions of people and trying to just extract information from them and then leave and have that be the end of it. Rather, thinking about how we can kind of initiate a relationship with the types of issues that we're thinking about, and try to find ways to keep that going once we're out of the picture. So we'd want to be looking at every engagement opportunity as an opportunity to start a healthy relationship between members of your community and members of your public safety teams, and at least getting them thinking about what do I really mean by being safe in my community? What does it mean other than being safe from theft or safe from physical assault? It probably means a lot more than that. And what might be the role of public safety departments and other community-based organizations in helping to make that happen? So those are the sorts of things that we'd be trying to assemble in the developing the plan phase. And so, I think the types of things that we'd be doing, I'm kind of moving forward into the third step here, which is launching the engagement. So we'd be using a variety of tools to engage folks. So we would want to use surveys, we would want to use interviews, we would want to do kind of community focus groups or town hall style meetings. We'd want to have some of these meetings be more of a facilitated experience for people rather than just a question and answer kind of thing for us. So again, I think like you folks were talking about, which is great, exactly, I think on point from our perspective, to be talking about what's your vision for this community? What is your vision for community safety? Some of these, kind of philosophical questions. What does it mean to be safe and to feel safe with your neighbors and your community members?
Can I interrupt?
Please, yeah.
One of the things we're noticing also in the recent years, and it's actually really it's almost like a hockey stick event happening, is a perception of psychological lack of safety, psychological unsafety, increasing. Like I don't just mean it's sort of ticking up. I mean, increasingly we're hearing when we talk about safety with people, a focus on that. And I think it can be very confusing to some of my generation and older. I think it can seem like nonsense to some people, and it can seem like life and death seriousness to others. And I think right here is where in our plan, we want to work with you as a community to say, what do we mean by safety? We do mean more than your car didn't get broken into, or you felt okay walking it dark through town. We mean that you feel like when you enter this room, it's a safe space. And what does that actually mean? And what doesn't it mean? It doesn't mean, you're entitled to being comfortable all the time, but it does mean that you're entitled to being safe. So I want to add that in because there's a lot of complexity in there and a lot of intergenerational misunderstanding. And even when it's not generational, it's across identity groups. And it's very much a factor in the way we think about safety these days.
Yeah, great. So I think one of the things that we really want to lean on in the engagement phase is to figure out, what is already working in terms of ways that people are engaging and places that people gather. So, rather than always asking people to come to us, we want to know where are people gathering now, and can we go there and engage them there, rather than asking them always to come to us. So, if people frequent the public library, that might be something that we would, try to think about and figure out how we could use a venue like that to do engagement, rather than always expecting that people that are going to be engaged come to where we are. So Liz, anything more about?
I was just thinking about the representation. So when we can't get the representation we want, say with a survey or from a town hall meeting or something, we have to go where the specific kinds of people go. So we did a project once in a neighborhood that was very diverse. We analyzed all our data. We see that African-American men between like 18 and 30 are not answering the survey and not coming to the meetings, and they're not available to us, but we know they live here. The census tells us. So we finally settle on, there's a community center with some programming that's attracting that group of residents. So we took one of our interns and we gave her an iPad and a set of questions. And we said, you're going to stand at that registration desk like every night for the next week. and invite people as they're coming or going that appear to be in this demographic if they're willing to talk to you. And then you'll confirm whether they are or are not. And then if they are not, you can give them their time back. And if they are, ask them if they're willing to answer a couple of questions. And we did it like that because we didn't like not having the rounded perspectives. But I offer that because I think we're committed. Like if you say we really want to hear from this group of people and we can't figure out how to hear from them, we will find a way to hear from them painlessly.
And yeah, and what that looks like then is having kind of two phases of engagement. The first one is we're doing an initial round of engagement, and then we're looking at who we have not been able to engage, and then figuring out a new set of strategies to engage people that we haven't been able to engage yet. That's one example that Liz gave. We did a really large public safety project in the Navajo Nation. And there were lots of cultural barriers there to gaining engagement. And this was in the middle of the pandemic. So it was really, really hard to hear from people that we needed to hear from in order to do a good job on that project. And what it meant was covering a lot of miles.
Yes.
And being willing to be where people were already, and being willing to speak with them on their terms and to observe their cultural preferences around the way that you introduce yourself and the way that you show up and take space. Those things were really important, and those are things that we don't often, I don't think, meet it in that exaggerated of a way where we're really immersing ourselves in a different cultural melee. But sometimes we do, and I think that's one of the things that we do really well is figure out how to adapt to those contexts that require us to, sometimes radically change course from what we do in sort of a straight ahead planning type process. So again, that looks like two phases. The first phase being an initial push with engagement, noticing who we've not had success engaging with, and then developing a new set of strategies. And the process management team that I started off talking about would hopefully be a big guide in that, as would be other people that we've met during the first phase of stakeholder engagement. So if we know somebody's a really strong advocate for a certain community that we're not having representation with, we might ask them for their support in engaging the community that they have a relationship with. So that's the third phase. So then there's two more phases. One of them, the fourth one, is about analyzing and preparing a preliminary report. So the analysis and preliminary report phase, I think, really is meant to set us up to have a series of conversations. So first, a conversation, we'd like to have a facilitated kind of workshop. We could obviously figure out exactly what that looks like, but with members of town leadership and leadership of public safety departments. So we'd want to sit down and say, hey, here's what we're learning based on your experience. What do you make of all of this? And where do you think this tells us we should be headed? So that would be kind of the first step, is to have an engagement session with leadership of the involved departments. Maybe again, I don't know what the landscape is for community-based organizations here, but if you have some that you frequently work with, have good relationships with, we would want those people in that conversation for sure. And we'd work with you all to figure out, kind of who the right players are to have and the right time to involve them. We'd also want to involve your department personnel and other members of the, other town employees that would be relevantly engaging with these issues, because you folks are going to be responsible for implementing a lot of what comes out of this. And we think it's a great recipe for failure if you don't involve people that are going to be tasked with implementation in the planning phase. So we want to make sure that we're hearing first from your whole community, and then from the people that are going to be kind of leading the charge in terms of making change. And then figuring out, can we make some recommendations that are going to meet community needs and also be things that you can do, given your resources, given your experience, given what you know about your communities. So that wraps up the fourth phase. And then the final step is just us kind of taking that all and turning it into a final report, which would have, I think, coming out earlier in the process would be vision statements, potentially some value statements, if we're kind of feeling that coming out in community sessions. We'd hopefully have identified some community safety priorities and some strategies to achieve those things. And then also some ideas that we will have built on throughout the course of engagement related to sustaining relationships that we've kind of helped you all form over the course of doing this. Like I said, we want to make sure that we're in a reciprocal relationship, not just taking information from people. So giving you some thoughts about how to sustain some of the relationships that we've helped you create over the course of the process. And then finally, a plan that would help you share the results. Let people know what the process turned up, what the priorities are, how you would like to implement them. And I think that's it.
Yeah.
What would you add?
Well, I was just thinking, as you were talking about community priorities in Boston, which of course has a lot of special crime features. And also has, in my day, had a very data-driven approach to preventing crime. At the time, it was, some of you may remember Operation Ceasefire. There was a researcher at Harvard. He did a lot of, yeah, you know about that. And, you know, I was part of that team because I'm just that old. But one of the things that was very interesting, we thought Operation Ceasefire was about people shooting each other, kids shooting each other in the street and trying to stop that. Very important. But when you went to other neighborhoods in Boston, what you found out from community residents was the thing that was driving them crazy actually was noise. And there was like a summertime festival culture where maybe 20% of the population thought it was great and 80% of the population thought they were losing their minds. And they were incredibly frustrated because when they were calling the police were talking about shootings and Operation Ceasefire and gang membership. And they were saying, could we just get somebody to enforce the noise ordinances? And there was, in fact, no one to do that. So I think that's the kind of disconnect. I remember my colleague at the time saying the police have professional legitimacy and they don't grant that to the community, and the community has moral legitimacy and they don't grant that to the police. And if we could get these guys to see each other's legitimacy across the board, we could have a different conversation. So we did. We involved 1,000 people in 14 different small teams over the course of a year to do planning for safety at the exact same time we were doing Operation Ceasefire. And so it's interesting. Your presentation was super interesting to me because I thought, well, you guys have a sort of an Operation Ceasefire talent, you know, and we have this 1,000 people strategic planning talent, and they're both really important. And I'm sure you do a lot of what we do and we do a lot of what you do, but I'm sort of struck by, we're still trying to figure out the relationship, frankly, of data and information to strategy and community engagement and new solutions. And I often think about the problem with information and data is that we don't actually use it very often. And if we did, we would have probably solved the climate crisis by now, right? Because we know we got a problem, but we haven't got a solution. And so we really want to jump into that territory with you and say, there's information and there really is hardcore data here. And I'm sure you're gathering it and reporting it and you've got it. And we got to figure out what to do with it so that it becomes actionable for a community to make the place not only safer, but more vibrant and more fun, and a place where young people can grow up with hope for a great future and maybe even stay there. So I'll leave it at that and see what question. Well, we know what questions you have.
We will still ask them. I
Right,
guess,
good.
I think I've answered at least number 2 already.
Yeah. Okay, number 1 then, could you share more about your experience working with rural communities and how you apply what you've learned from that experience to working with Hartford?
I'm super excited about that question because my first rural project was the Northeast Kingdom Learning Services. And this was forever ago as a baby consultant. But it was fascinating because it was also my first introduction to remote learning and remote work. It was well before most of you had ever heard of anything like that. These folks were on the cutting edge of that and nothing else. It was at the time maybe still one of the most impoverished regions of the country. It was incredibly severely lacking in resources, but they had mastered remote learning. And I remember thinking, well, necessity is the mother of invention. And we did some planning and we worked with what they had and we did a great job. Since then, more recently, we've also done a ton of work in New Hampshire with the whole state, their insurance department. Sounds boring, was really interesting. Insurance regulation is a critical feature of a high quality community, actually, because you have to be able to get the insurance companies to come and write policies, and you have to make sure that they're not, pardon me, screwing the people that they're covering. So like those 2 mandates don't easily work together, and our job was to help them make a strategy to make that work. And that was fundamentally about serving rural communities as opposed to working in them because they were in a city. Working in rural communities, I think one of my favorite examples is the Lincoln Trail Workforce Development Board. You obviously have workforce boards here too. This one's in Kentucky. And you know, if you're familiar with the way workforce boards work, often it's about how are we going to train the next generation of nurses or teachers or whatever we're short of. Now we're short of everything, right? But they were short of everything long before the rest of us were. So we did a strategy with them about how to get people, how to raise labor force participation rates altogether. So stop worrying about unemployment, the shorthand became get people like back to work off the couch. And this sounds insulting, but really the truth is many people, and it's amplified since we did this work, it was pre-pandemic, have decided that it's easier or better for their families for them to not work than to work. And that is a real problem if you're in a community like Lincoln Trail is. So I raised those two examples because I think we're familiar with both the difficulties from Navajo Nation, from New Hampshire, from Kentucky, of actually being on the ground in rural places. We're also familiar with the range and the complexity of problems that face rural places. Sometimes people hear me coming from Boston and they think she's never going to understand because she's from the big city. It's not that big a city, and it's the really interesting strategic challenges in these rural places have really captured our attention. So those are a couple examples.
I just want to be cognizant of time, so we don't have issues later down.
I have them in 24 minutes, and I think the other presentation went a couple over, so.
Perfect.
Wrap
And
it
then
up in like
the answer
8
to
or so.
number 3 is also in the proposal, so we
Yeah.
There you go.
we can skip that one too.
So, question 4.
Great. And that was about the interviews, right? Is that right?
Question 3 was yes, about, well, that was about, yeah, just, let's just ask question 4.
Should I go ahead?
Yeah.
So this is the one to describe what your stakeholder interview process would be like, and with potentially like examples of questions you might ask. Sure.
It would be designed with the process management team that Josh mentioned, tested once or twice in, the interview protocol gets tested in a couple of ways. If we do a survey, which I think we plan to do here, that gets tested a couple of times. There's boring testing like the glitch, the skip logic doesn't work or whatever. And then there's interesting problems like people think that question doesn't make any sense. So sample questions, I think, are the ones that are going to yield something we don't already know. My least favorite thing about stakeholder engagement is we run around and do it and then find nothing new. So we really want to figure out how are we going to learn something that you don't already know. One of my favorite questions came from work around, it was supposed to be a one-stop center to serve victims of domestic violence. And as you're no doubt aware, that is a very complicated crime to intervene in. Often, I hate to say it this way, but often the feeling is that victims are not cooperative. And the reason victims are not cooperative is complex, but extremely important. And so one of the favorite questions we developed was, if you have a victim in front of you seeking remedy of some sort, what would justice or safety look like for you? Not in general for our community, but for you, because each victim of that crime has a different answer to that. And if you don't know their answer, they cannot get served. And so that's, while I don't know what our questions are, I want the question that's going to yield a way of thinking about things that we haven't had yet. One of the things I'm thinking that we would want to dig into is what would you do if you had that local, what did you call it? The local option tax? Mm-hmm. I mean, we have a huge opportunity to help you with that, because if we were to use our project properly, we could help you say within the context of the body of community needs, education, health, transportation, et cetera, what does the community want for priorities inside the safety bubble? And how could you allocate that so you would have less problems in spending it? It's weird how spending more money creates more problems, but there it is. You know that better than me.
Great. How would you handle situations in which respondents are not comfortable answering personal questions?
Yeah, so I can take that one. So I think, in a couple of different ways. So actually, one of the things I didn't say during the introduction is like how I came into this work. I used to be an academic and I ended up doing consulting work. So I served a couple of terms as a board member at what's called the Massachusetts Office of Victim Assistance. So you probably have something similar in Vermont, that you have an agency that oversees, funding decisions and allocations to organizations that provide services to victims of crime. So I spend a lot of time working with survivors of violent crime and also organizations that support them in that capacity. And so had to become really familiar with kind of trauma-informed approaches to engaging with people in all different ways. So not just in the interview process, but also just sort of in designing stakeholder engagement in general, and even setting up, developing materials for public outreach and things like that. I also, we also worked for that same agencies several years later doing a strategic planning process, and we had to do like a statewide engagement, stakeholder engagement process, engaging specifically people that were victims or survivors of violent crime. And so we had to be really, really careful about how we engage people, how we respect their safety in conversation, how we frame questions, the context in which we ask the questions, the spaces in which we ask them, who else is with us when we do it, who else is with them when we have the conversations. So those are all factors that we would need to take into consideration. I think when we, when we're thinking about engagement, and figuring out in which cases we have to take extra special care and in which cases are we sort of talking to people that are kind of done in Navajo Nation. And one of the issues out there, I think, has been that they're or gay. And over time, that openness has changed because sort of part of their traditional belief system is that some people are what are called two-spirit. And so people that are two-spirit, this is just sort of like related to the way that related to their sexuality, related to their gender identity, and it's sort of a natural human variant. And I think more recently, some of those traditional belief systems have eroded. So there's this sort of mixed situation where on the one hand, you have a lot of openness and and on the other hand, you have some real kind of perceptions of threat from people that belong to those communities. So we really needed to hear from everybody, and that was including people that belong to LGBTQ communities and that's part of the Navajo Nation. And so what we needed to do was kind of develop a relationship with somebody that already had a trusting relationship with some of those communities through advocacy relationships. There were advocates that were kind of more open about their identities. And so we built a relationship with them, and once they trusted us, said, okay, well, I'll make the introduction to, these young people that would probably be happy to have a focus group conversation with you if they know that I trust you. So I think that basic model, works pretty well, of developing a relationship with somebody that already has a relationship with the folks that you're trying to engage with.
Mm-hmm.
So we do have a bit of experience doing that, closer to here and further in Navajo. And I think that's the model that we probably use. It's a trauma-informed approach, basically to stakeholder engagement, generally speaking, and then using kind of a relationship-based model to engage people that have been reluctant to engage with us for concerns around safety.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both very much for coming in and discussing this with us. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
It was great to meet you.
Yeah, very nice to meet you.
And good luck.
All right.
Yeah, very much.
Yeah.
I hear you come highly recommended.
I've got a lot of IOUs to have to pay.
All right, well, we're going to take a break before our next item. So let's get back here at 20 ish. Great. Back from our break, we got a few items to look at. The first is the preferred site request from Norwich Solar. Turn it over to you.
Sure. I'm Dana Clausen. I'm the Town of Hartford Sustainability Coordinator. Tonight, we're going to look at Norwich Solar's request for a 500 kilowatt system on Braley Drive, which is off of Christian Street. Before we get it started here, people kind of get excited about this topic sometimes. So, Mr. Chair, I just want to go over the rules of procedure. I'm going to introduce Norwich Solar. I'll talk for a minute to give some background. At that point, Jeff and Martha will present, and then they'll take questions from the select board, and then it'll be questions from the public with a total of 5 minutes per person from public to public comments. Once that wraps up, you all will deliberate and we'll go from there.
Sounds great.
All right. So for those of you that aren't familiar with the preferred siting process, if you want to put a solar array in Vermont that's between 150 kilowatts and 500 kilowatts, you're required to put it on a preferred site. A site can become preferred either because there's already previous development there. It is a brownfield. You can't have other development there. There was something there before. Basically, the land has to have limited use. If you're pretty much putting it on an area that has not been developed or has not been developed in a number of years, you've got to get it deemed preferred site. The preferred siting process is, folks, the developer needs to go to the local planning commission, the local select board, and then the regional planning commission, and get a letter from each of those bodies that they deem it a preferred site. If at any point in that process, any of those bodies say no, game over, the PUC, the Public Utilities Commission, will not accept the application from the developer. And I just want to be clear too, this is not a permit process. The permit process is with the Public Utilities Commission. Once this wraps up, and they've got that paperwork, Norwich Solar will put together an application. They will submit that to the Public Utilities Commission. There is then, I believe, a 30-day public comment period where that is made public, and the remarks from the select board, abutters, and others are welcomed at that point. And then they get to start about a 9-month process with the public, or longer. I mean, one site that Jeff put through 3 years ago when he was in this chair, I think just got cleared a couple months ago. So it is a long process. For this process so far, Jeff emailed me on March, me and Jesse, by the way, I just want to acknowledge Jesse, the chair of the Energy Commission, is here. He emailed us on March 29th about this project. And we put them on the on the Energy Commission agenda. That is not required, but in Hartford, the Planning Commission and others have requested that the Energy Commission gives it a first overview and writes a letter of support. And the Planning Commission does rely heavily on their decision. Once that passed, we got them on the Planning Commission agenda on June 8th. We had a pretty good discussion, I think, for about an hour, a little over an hour. There was a couple of questions around if the site was going to be visible that the Planning Commission asked them to go look into. They came back on August 9th. We had about another hour, a little longer than an hour meeting. And the Planning Commission was happy with what they heard. They approved it. And then this was the, with just people's calendars and schedules, this was the soonest that I could get them in front of you all. So at this point, I will turn it over to a familiar face.
Thank you, Dana. Hi, everyone. Thanks for putting us on the agenda this evening. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Jeff Martin, formerly the Hartford Energy Coordinator, now the Development Project Manager at Norwich Solar. I'm joined by Martha Staskis. She's our Chief Development Officer. Want to thank the Planning Commission for their time in reviewing our request for preferred site designation, as well as the Energy Commission for their thorough review as well. For those of you that don't know Norwich Solar, we're a local solar company just up the road on Railroad Row. Been around since 2011 and do everything related to solar, from the design to permitting, construction, operation, and maintenance of solar arrays. And Norwich Solar has permitted over half a dozen projects here in Hartford, including several municipal projects, the wastewater treatment plant, DPW, public safety building, as well as the Wilder Well, and then other projects as well that have gone through the preferred siting process with the select board. So in terms of this project, and Dana, I might take you up on the offer to have the computer. So this is our conceptual plan. Here we go. So the project is proposed on a 36-acre parcel here on Braley Drive, and Braley Drive is right off of Christian Street. It's a private gravel drive, and as you can see, to the east here is Interstate 91. To the north is Sterling Springs, and here's Christian Street, and then down further south, you can't actually see it on the conceptual plan here, is Route 14. The parcel is a previously disturbed parcel, so there's a mix, and I provided some pictures in the packet so you could kind of get the lay of the land. Mix of conifers and deciduous trees, as well as open areas and some early successional vegetation within the project area. So we'll connect the project to the three-phase power that runs along Christian Street here. The footprint of the array, this down here, is about 2.5 acres. It's a fixed ground mount array oriented to the south to capture the sun's energy. The rows of panels run from west to east, about 3 feet or so above ground level at the lowest point, 15 feet or so above ground level at the highest point. And then the rows of panels are connected electrically with an underground cable and conduit. The total limit of disturbance, so that's everything you see within this white dotted line here. I'll keep tracing it, but you get the point. It's about 12.5 acres. And that includes the array footprint itself, the access, so everything from Christian Street. And then, so Braley Drive ends about here, but then there's an existing access that continues throughout the property that we'll make use of. So again, the total limit of disturbance is the array, the access, the staging area, temporary staging area here that's used during construction. It's that like hatched area. And then an area around the array that'll be maintained for shade management, and that will be maintained as a meadow throughout the life of the project. It's a 500 kilowatt array, so that will generate approximately 900,000 kilowatt hours per year of renewable energy, and that's approximately enough to power 135 typical homes. And the project will benefit the town's enhanced energy plan in terms of meeting the 90% renewable by 2040 goal, as well as the climate emergency resolution and the climate action plan, and the goal of achieving net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. So at this point, we're requesting the select board designate the site as a preferred site under PUC rule 5.100. And Martha, anything that you want to add at this point?
Thanks.
Questions?
Turn it over for questions
from the board. Manny?
What is the substrate? Subsoil, what is the subsoil in this area? Is it ledge? Is it ground? What is it? What is the ground?
We've not done any geotechnical drilling at this point. We expect that the racking system that will support the panels will be either drilled or pile driven.
So you don't know what the runoff will be from rainwater from this?
Well, the project's required to have a state agency of Natural Resources Department of Environmental Conservation stormwater permit, which it will be the requirements of that permit will be that all runoff will be contained within the limits of disturbance. So, for example, we'll use the trees that are on site that are cut will be ground, and we'll use them for grindings to create berms around the edge to maintain the water flow during the construction phase. And then the site is seeded and mulched and revegetated to maintain ground cover.
Then one more question. Within the white dotted area, you're going to deforest that and turn that into all meadowland. Is that correct?
We're going to cut the trees. Yes. There's all right, I think is in the packet.
Yeah, the pictures in the package show the existing conditions on the site, which, as I mentioned, there's a large open area within the project area already. And some younger trees, like 10 or 15 foot high trees that are within that project area as well.
Rocket, do you have a question?
A comment, really. I think last year we saw Norwich come in and I was on the vote against designating preferred site, after which I came by and I had a very thorough explanation, which I appreciated you taking the time. I think, you know, when I look reflectively on my own service, I think that it was a mistake to deny the preferred site last year. I think that this presentation to me makes sense. One of my concerns that I had last year that I still have is, you know, how do we use land in our town and make sure that we are prioritizing space for housing? And one of the great considerations that I hadn't considered previously was that a solar field can be used for a period of time and with minimal disturbance then be resited and repurposed for housing in the future when our community is ready. So I thought that was very compelling. I think that this presentation is strong. I think that we also last year got way distracted by conversations about carbon capture and measuring and mining and, you know, like a lot of things that I think I did not realize how many hoops we have to get through to get solar fields in town, and the select board is just one of those many. And I would like, I imagine there may be further comments and discussion within this presentation, which of course the public has a right to, but I do think that I want to say that personally I've grown and changed in my perspective and fully supportive of this, and think that I'm ready to support whenever the community is ready or the board is ready.
Mr. Chairman, may I make a comment specifically to that? You will be happy to know this land is owned by Steve Davis, who owns Vermont, and one of his desires is, if you look at the northern area of the property, his objective, I mean, I don't have it in plans, but he has represented to us that his goal is to also put housing along that portion of the property. So he's got a dual use of his property, one for the renewable energy and then additionally for the houses that will most likely have solar as well.
I appreciate that. And I also remember that last year, one of the great concerns that came in from a lot of neighbors, one was runoff. So that was something that Lanny was addressing. The other was the visual aesthetics of it. Now, I don't live near a solar field, but I also am not bothered by the aesthetics of it, but I can understand that that's a common concern. I did feel like that was well addressed in this packet in terms of the siting and the angling and so forth. And so I appreciate that. I appreciate that a lot of those considerations were brought from last year into this year's package and presentation. So I find it very compelling.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions?
Yep, one more. In terms of the shading that you spoke about, you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, the goal of the solar array, of course, is to capture all the sun's energy, and so the area to the south generally is, you know, the most important, that there's no shading on the south side, but also, you know, the east and the west. So that's why you see the limit of disturbance here kind of surrounding the array here, and you see a very small area to the north because.
So I can't really point it out real well, but I mean, where is the closest area of the, you say the fence line to the solar arrays? How many feet how far is that?
To what?
To the fence line. Like if we're looking at like between here and here,
how
close is that going to be? That's going to be, I assume the white dots are going to be a fence around the perimeter.
No, so the fence is actually the black dots here.
Okay, so that's gonna be fence. Okay, but yet the white dots are just gonna be cleared field then. All right, so how far from the cleared field to the fence line then, and the closest point of approach?
There's a scale there.
I know,
There's
but
a
I
scale
can't.
on the right-hand side, and it's typically, we're gonna try to look at, as a rule of thumb, we'll look at from 100 to 150 feet on the east, south, and west. to allow, as the sun rises, to capture that sun as soon as possible, pass over, and then set to the west and capture that as long as possible. And as Jeff is pointing out, at the north, there's no reason to cut trees in the north because we're not getting any sun from there. And then the fence is going to be approximately a little bit more than 20 feet from the end of the rows so that a mower can get around the end and through the rows.
So unlike Rocket, I live on what I believe to be the largest solar array in the town of Hartford, literally on top of it. And it is unsightly. And I was promised when the solar array was built that trees would be put up to help hide the solar array. And that did not happen. So just from a standpoint of a neighbor, I could understand why there would be concern about viewing this solar array from their backyard.
Objection on relevance, Mr.
Yeah.
Chair?
Well, we can respond to that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay,
There are no neighbors
so
at
this, as Jeff mentioned, the site is a 36-acre parcel. The project is set over 430 feet from the northern boundary, which is our closest neighbors. So we've retained a tree buffer of approximately 400 to 430 feet for that purpose. Now we have the interstate to the east, and there's also an elevation change, which you've probably observed. And then one of the owners, I'll call it a host participant, lives on Brayley Street. So she is right where Jeff's hand is there. And so I don't think she'll see the array anyway, but she wants the solar project. And then as you can see, the lands to the south are all remaining forested. So I think that actually, to Rocket's point, we have tried to be very aware and address the visual potential. And some like it and some don't. You're going to get that with any project.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Not, I'll take a motion.
Mr. Chair, I want to make a motion.
Back it on page 34.
Mr. Chair, I move that the Hartford Select Board designate.
Approve, yeah, this
Approve.
italicized language, I think.
I see. 96 Brayley Drive and White River Junction as a preferred site. And that we authorize you, the chair, to sign a letter in support that will satisfy the Public Utilities Commission's requirements to start the permitting process.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion. Hank?
Yeah, so this will come before the board one more time, two more times, before it's actually.
So the next step, once the Regional Planning Commission designates it, so we have all three parties that Dana referred to earlier, then we can issue a 45-day notice now, actually. But we like to have the community's support, or at least the municipal board and the select board, planning commission and select board, sorry. So there's going to be a 45-day advance notice of the application filing. That's a letter that is addressed to the select board, the planning commission and the regional commission and all the abutting property owners. And it will notify them that in no less than 45 days, an application will be submitted to the Public Utility Commission. So within that 45-day period, the community and anybody can make a comment on that. Any comment that we receive in that period of time, we have to and will address in the application. Then the application will go out, and again, it will go to the select board, the planning commission, regional commission, abutting property owners, state agencies. And then there's another 30-day period, which Dana referred to, that again, comments can be provided to. In that time, they're provided to the Public Utility Commission.
Comment?
Rocket, yep.
I want to apologize. Last year, I think I erred in my vote. I haven't lost sleep over it, but I do think it was a mistake. And I think this is a fight worth fighting. I appreciate you bringing this back in.
Any other discussion? Any other discussion?
It's a different application, a different property.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
understand.
okay, okay.
Okay, well, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Dan says yes.
Okay, so 601. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
All right. Mary is absent.
So 6 in favor, 0 opposed, 1 absent.
Okay, so we're gonna get a parking meter update from Lori.
They have. Okay, they will. Yeah, sure. They will. I'm sure they will.
All right.
Your favorite topic, Mike?
Oh, I
Parking
know.
meters.
Okay, so we're gonna get an update on parking meters from Lori. Lori, whenever you're ready.
Well, I distributed to you your tables, and there are also some extra copies back there on the table. Just to sort of a little bit on where we are. My understanding is that when I was not here at the last meeting, there was a question about how would the parking meter overall management and maintenance be covered over time. And so what I prepared for you was just a brief update showing what was originally approved for the budget, which was $233,000 of ARPA dollars to go towards the purchase and installation of the meters, and then to purchase a special sidewalk plow. And in that, we're going to be covering 141 spaces in downtown White River Junction, 29 on Prospect Street, and then 56 spaces in the Town Square parking lot, which is across from the Hotel Coolidge. That whole section is the area that when you come into town and you see those signs that say parking for 2 hours in downtown White River Junction, those are the areas that are covered for it in downtown. And then we agreed at the time last year when we were looking at all of it, that due to some issues that are existing on Prospect Street for parking, that should be included within the 2-hour parking period as well. So that was what we agreed to last year, or actually at the beginning of this year when we were doing the CIP for the current fiscal year we're in. So the time period that we have is Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., continuing that as the documented time period for the meters. So in relationship to the cost of this, when we were pricing it out, we were looking at what is being done in other municipalities in the area, what's the typical usage of those, how much of that can you count on as revenue during the course of a day, a week, a month, a year. And so in programming that out, Hanover is one of the ones that uses a system that we were looking at as well for a vendor. And, $1 an hour is a very low cost for parking. We don't really want to come into a high cost for that, but that's a reasonable amount and it's very comparable. And in fact, in some instances, lower than what you do see in the area. So we did stick with that, looking at it from the perspective of 5 days a week and the hours that we have, and then only anticipating 50% of occupancy for each meter. And so when you compute that out, and I'll tell you, this was always a shocker to me. I have redone these numbers so many times, that you actually have quite a bit of revenue being generated from the number of meters that we would have. And even at 50% occupancy, there's still a significant amount there that then can go towards the staffing that may be necessary to do this. There are several, actually quite a number of options where you can engage with the company that is the vendor to automate the systems. And so part of that automation is already identified here in the estimated annual fee, which is kind of a basic one, about $10,000. And then you can go up from there. It depends on how much you want done by people versus how much you want it to be automated and so forth. But what I wanted to demonstrate through this additional information is that there's sufficient revenue being generated by the parking meters to do the maintenance of it and staffing of it for billing and whatever we decide we want to do, or purchase that through the vendor. And then I would obviously recommend that, there is a bit of a maintenance that's built into this system in terms of the pricing already, but obviously it's a good practice to maybe set up some kind of a fund over time, money going into a fund for replacement or upgrades or for repairs or, unexpected repairs over time. So that was my understanding of the update that was being requested. My previous update had also indicated we were going through the RFP process. We are a participant in a national procurement system that we've used for purchasing vehicles, purchasing, equipment and so forth. This is similar in which we can participate in that. I'm looking at that and the different companies that are acquired to are participating partners is what they call them in the one that we do participate in. So, but those are all things that are part of that RFP process that I had indicated that we're going to be engaging in, over the course of this month and seeing where we come out with the cost estimates.
Questions for Lori? Second?
Lori, this is probably going to come out through the RFP process, so just a continuation of that. But I know that a lot of Burlington, Hanover, I believe a lot of surrounding communities use Park Mobile. And that, first off, I love this and this is great and I appreciate it. And the numbers look amazing. We should have gotten the parking business a lot earlier from a financial perspective. But as far as Park Mobile goes, the infrastructure is like signs and it's done, seems to be more digitally than physical meters. Do you know what I'm referring
So there's
to?
a couple different approaches that we looked at in the past.
Yeah.
As much as we're doing a kiosk format that's going to be in the parking lots, and there'll be dual meters, so it'll be one stand for 2 slots. So we're trying to minimize the number of things. But empirically, in looking at it, and I've heard this from so many people and it experienced myself, that when you put up these like little kiosks here and then the whole stretches here, people tend to get confused as to what spaces are covered by parking meters and which ones are not. And that's probably the biggest complaint that you hear of systems. Now, the one in Burlington, and we have our app on our phones, because we're participating in that. And so it's very convenient when you're in a parking garage. But on individual streets or it's good in a large parking lot as well. But on individual on-street parking spaces, the enforcement and lack and visibility of what spaces are attached and what are not to parking spaces and limitations work better when you have that visual of the meter. And that's why we're getting the special plow as well. It'll help us get around.
Right, so I understand that and I appreciate that explanation. I just wonder, 5-10 years ago, no one was really using QR codes, even though that was sort of an emergent technology. And now it seems that everyone seems.
Oh yeah, well this allows us, this has all that technology in all of these systems.
My point is with physical meters is that it's a lot of hardware to install in our town and then we're getting a special plow for that. I'm just wondering if as a community, clear signage, or there might be more minimally invasive ways of achieving this effectively, because I think a big part of the cost as well is the hardware, right? Versus drilling a bunch of signs and having everyone use the same app that they use in Norwich Hanover or Burlington. So I'm just sort of curious about if there's been some analysis about if it's working in other communities, why would it not work for ours? Yeah.
Jen?
I mean, I'm sure Lori can answer this, but a follow-up question I would have for that is, so what we're talking about will be a device that people can pay with the app, with a credit card, and with coins.
Yes,
Okay,
correct.
that is ideal, which is the case in Woodstock. That is the case, I think, in Hanover as well. So, which is an accessibility thing too. Not everyone's going to have an app or even a credit card or a debit card, but so could be someone that has a jar of quarters in their car for when they travel or whatever. Anyway, so that that answers my question. I don't know if it answers your question.
It does, but Rutland also has a kiosk system that does allow for coin payment at the kiosk itself. I'm just thinking, you know, we don't come out through the RFP process, I guess, but it just sort of a consideration that I've had is that, you know, how much, because obviously the more hardware you put in, the less accessible the sidewalks become as well, right? And I'm supportive of parking and so forth, so I think this is all great. And again, this will be a longer conversation, I think, once the responses to the RFP come.
I have a couple of questions. So what's the status of, you talked about this national proposal thing, like, what do you think a timeline is for when proposals would be submitted?
Well, that's what I'm doing this month.
Okay.
And then the goal is that, depending on, you know, installation, but it would be completed by the end of this fiscal year, but certainly probably before June is the expectation. That's what we are going to be putting in there. We want to get them installed. We want to have them operating this fiscal year.
And who does the installation?
The poles were originally, it was earmarked for the town to do the pole installation. But if we, so that's how it was set up. But those are things that we can include in the budget that we had done. But those are things that we can include in the RFP.
And the, like, staffing it, is that anything that's been considered yet? Like, is that a brand new position? Is that something?
Those are things that all need to be worked out as
and then
part
will
of
come
the
back
process.
before us, like with a proposal once there's
Because of the award, yeah, I believe you would have to do the award on that. This thing eliminates the need for us to do our own competitive process, but
yeah,
if there are different bids to be looked at.
But whatever, because the
Yeah,
amount
because
is
of the amount is
what it
over the
is,
amount,
then
right.
we will see the proposal
Yeah,
and
then
approve
we'll
the
award it.
contract. And I guess I would also just want to put in a pitch to just do it 9 to 5 instead of 8 to 6, but obviously that's not a major thing, but I'll just leave it there.
Okay.
Yeah, the only thing I might add to the whole scenario is that heard from many residents and businesses downtown as well, I think would appreciate it if the first 10 minutes would be free for the meters for pickups and deliveries would be, I think that would really be appreciated for businesses.
Right, and that is something that we had talked about that we
Yeah,
could do
definitely do
as
that.
well. It has the capability to program.
And then one other thought, so in the fiscal 25 budget discussions, we will theoretically have revenue source of parking meters that we can discuss how those funds are used, right? Or is that something that?
So I'm not sure, I mean, I have a projection here, okay? And just to give you guys a demonstration that even at 50% usage, it's pretty high. We certainly will have those numbers. How much you want to count on, how much that would be. You might want to take it on a slow go on the first fiscal year.
Yeah.
And then to see what it pans out.
Of course, I think my intent in asking that question is that we will hopefully have an opportunity to think about, like, maybe funds from that line item are allocated toward downtown beautification or some other, something that kind of benefits the vibrancy of the downtown. And even that, like, the idea of, I think kiosks in a lot make a lot of sense, but for the introduction or reintroduction, because if you ask David Riggs, he'll tell you about how there used to be parking meters in downtown White River Junction, but the introduction of it being as simple and easy to identify as possible, where some cities and towns had the old style parking meters that people were used to and then upgraded to a more digital platform. Anyway, I just think for an introduction or reintroduction to the meters, that having them as user-friendly as possible is really key.
So if we used to have meters downtown, I think it's a general question. Do we have or do we need an ordinance that allows the town to give someone a monetary penalty for an expired meter? Do you think we have one?
I don't know if we have one, but
We would need one. Yep.
one thing that's not mentioned in here is I used to do the parking enforcement on.
Yeah.
Supervise the guy to do the parking enforcement. It is a good generator of regular salary from that person out in funds. However, one thing we're not looking at in this form is not everybody can do it. And number two is we have to have enforcement in order to make this work. And number three is what Lori, I don't see on here is the fines generated is also a huge revenue.
Yeah.
If you're averaging 30 tickets a day and whatever we decide on from the fee, I've seen $15 up to $69.
Yeah.
For driving violation, a parking violation, the top is substantial. So
I imagine, yeah, I imagine also besides just enforcement, like if the town gives you a ticket, penalty, you should have somewhere to appeal it to.
Yeah, there needs to be an appeal process, there needs to be a proof list, and it's more in depth.
Yeah.
Ordinance wise, as far as enforcing it, and then who pays, and they don't pay, what is the penalty?
Yeah.
Rutland doubled every 7 days up to a certain amount, and then we run the boot list.
Yeah.
We had a city attorney, which was very helpful, because they were kind of in, but we don't have a town attorney and staff.
Yep.
So, not it, but obviously I attended. But that's a lot of things to consider other than just simply.
Yeah, and are they generally, the enforcement, are they generally like housed within the police, do you know?
Yes, in the beginning, we had civilians, for years we had civilians.
Yeah.
Doing the parking enforcement, and when they retired, we had an officer, to do it, because they could also do other things downtown, like the downtown beat patrol.
Yeah.
They help with crime reduction and things like that, it was a benefit. And all the money for that position came out of the parking meter funds. There was 3 parking meter funds, one was for fines, one was for meter collection, and one was for permits. We had 2-hour and 10-hour, and you could buy a permit for a 10-hour meter, a monthly permit for $30-some odd dollars in the park there every day. And you had hung permit in the window. So there was 3 funds there. We don't have 10-hour parking here, but you may end up with a couple funds, and then always that paid for the salary. The problem Rutland ran into was upkeep on the old meter head for $180 a piece. We went to kiosks in a good part of the downtown area of Rutland, the 2-hour meters. There was some confusion about where you go to get the meter, where to go park the spot. You can literally go to any kiosk in downtown and push in your numbers to get a ticket for your car. The other problem was I have to walk that way to get a ticket for my car. I'm not doing that. There's a lot of pros and cons of both systems. There's a lot of good ones out there to choose from.
So I heard you say a lot of pros and cons here, Chief, but what I'm not hearing is, would you say that in the long run, even with the cost associated with the meters, it was a revenue generating source for the system? Okay, so.
It's also, for those shop owners who liked it because people could not simply park there all day.
Okay.
Some of the biggest complaints were employees who were parking parking spots downtown all day. The customers couldn't park to go shop. Again, you can park in a 10-hour meter with a permit or feed the meter. We don't have an option here, but you can look at that in parking lots, buy a permit to park at parking lot. Lots of options.
Okay, excellent. So what is it that, Lori, are you looking for us?
It's an update.
It was just an update that I was requested to, how are we going to cover the cost of this? And just from the revenue made from the parking meters themselves. But the process is we're in the process of putting this together and then getting.
But the $225,000
to work with the fire, for the police chief on the matters that he
the
talked about.
$232,000 though, well, that will cover our initial cost to set this up.
Correct.
Okay.
Good. We do need to, if we do need an ordinance, we should know that.
VLCT may be helpful with some guidance there.
Because otherwise, we can't give out any tickets.
Lucky Mike parking downtown.
But this doesn't affect the VFW lot, right?
No.
The
South Main Street.
South Main Street parking lot?
No.
Yeah.
No, we're not doing that. That's the
so that's still
24-hour parking lot.
Okay.
We may decide sometime in the future to do that or not, but not now.
Thanks, Lori. All right, next item, finalize FYE 2025 budget guidance.
Quite a privilege, Chairman. Can you do something about the reverb from these mics?
Yeah, that would be great.
The
I was
major
also
reverb.
mentioned they had to turn off the mics because the 2 members at the end tend not to speak into the microphone. So they had to turn them up to catch, yes, those 2. So we can turn the mics down, but please try and speak into the microphone.
Thank you for giving us the feedback now.
Yes, no problem. Well, it seemed like it was going so well.
Just a lot of reverb, that's all.
Okay, so 2025 budget guidance. We discussed this a little bit last meeting. Does anyone have any thoughts, feelings about the budget guidance?
Yeah, same
Okay.
notes as last time. And if anyone wants to, I mean, I'm happy to just rephrase those. And then if anyone has any additional ones, I'm happy to.
My understanding is we did talk about maybe setting, I mean, it is guidance, right? But setting some kind of limit on the percent increase. But I've also been told that if we do that, we should probably say of spending that's not like employee benefit spending, because the health insurance costs are going through the roof. And if we kept it at 3% based on the entire budget, we would actually have to have departments cut funds just to keep it within 3%. So if we want to get some kind of guidance on the actual percentage increase, I think we need to make a note that that basically does not include, I don't know what you want to call it, employee benefits spending, something like that.
Do we know how much that?
It's going to go up 14%.
To employee benefits?
And I don't know until we get Galen here about, you know, what that looks like. If we kept other spending at 3%, what's the total increase? And that's something we'll find out during the budget meetings. But I mean, otherwise, I thought the guidance looked good. You know, if we want to put something in like that, I would just recommend we have that caveat. And at the same time, it is guidance, so it's not legally binding on us.
I saw some notes from Kim about school. Did you?
I mean, I think that that'll be in the capital improvement discussions that we continue to have. Like, I think we're probably not gonna, you know, I mean, at some point, John, if the board agrees, it might be helpful to just get a sense if the school district knows if they're planning on any bond votes for this year. If you were to reach out to the superintendent, I mean, obviously they're gonna be going through their budget process as well, but they probably have a good sense if they were planning on it. I mean, that way I think will impact our decisions on how to prioritize things as well. Like if the school's got a $25 million bond that they're planning on, then we might take that into consideration. But I don't know that that would go into the operating budget considerations. I do still think that, you know, 10% of the annual operating budget should be maintained in the unassigned fund balance, and I think we have more than that, so we'll look at that as a consideration for a source potentially.
Isn't 10% really high? Didn't we hear that once?
It is.
Yeah. No.
We have more than that. I mean, like, I think and we have gotten in a jam and we've looked at making it 5%. I mean, that's a whole nother discussion. That is like, in theory, we need to refund taxpayers all of that money. So I think if anything, that we leverage as much as is reasonable to reduce the tax rate for taxpayers, even though it's not 100% of the exact same people that paid the taxes.
Right.
First thing, maintain focus on mitigating climate change. I do not like this bullet point.
It's guidance.
Yeah.
Just want to remember.
Oh, I know.
Remind everyone.
Oh, I know. I would recommend we strike it. I think it's a serious issue that we need to, climate change is a serious issue that we should address. I would rather see department heads focus on resiliency. If we look at like community resiliency, which might include transitioning to renewable energy, that would make sense. I think I've said this in the past. I think thinking about Hartford as moving the needle on climate change globally does not really make sense to me. So I think there's a lot of overlap nonetheless, but I think really thinking about it in terms of this is Hartford tax money. These are Hartford departments. How can we make sure that we are best positioning our town to succeed and to thrive long term? Climate change to me is kind of like it's a big concept, right? I mean, we could also talk about global supply chain, and we could talk about a lot of other issues, but I think focusing locally is important.
Would you, how would you feel about if we just change the wording to say something like adhere to the objectives in the climate action plan, which definitely relate primarily to adaptability and resilience? Sure. I mean, so just use the phrase adhere to objectives in the climate action plan.
And I don't mean to nitpick, I know this is just guidance, you know, I think though, one of the things I would love to work on as a community, and I'm really excited to have you here, John, because I haven't served yet with a full town manager. But I feel like it's easy for us to kind of like green light, quote unquote, smaller expenses at the 10 to 50, 10 to $100,000 range. But then all those things really add up. And then all of a sudden we look and we got a bond for several $1 million. And I think that if there's a way that we could think about, yes, being proactive about solving problems before they get to the problem that Fairview Terrace and Gate Street has become, I think that's great. And on the other side, let's address problems. Let's find solutions to problems that we know exist instead of problems that might be real, but may not be the right fit for Hartford, or, you know, just like scoping the way that we attack this well. So I'm kind of identifying two things here. One is like saving our pennies so we can spend in dollars. And the other is just making sure that we are properly identifying solutions or problems before we identify solutions. And some of the problems might be like, look, we know that we're going to need to set money aside for this infrastructural project. So I think those are two things that I know we have a lot in here about infrastructure, which is great. So no knock about that, but I do think it's really that first one of how I find myself in the position of a select board relying heavily on our department heads and that institutional knowledge, and would like to continue the board engaging in a bigger conversation about, as we see, for example, the CIP conversations that are about to emerge and some of those big ticket items, what are ways that we can start like really thinking big picture and saving up to making that effective, doing it effectively. I don't know if that adds anything to this at all.
Are we good with that change? Well, just the question is just, are we going to approve this guidance?
Yeah, we can strike parking meters as well. Detailed guidance.
Well, I had mentioned that last time, and then my notes say add back in, because for this, because we were talking about the operation.
Because it hasn't been implemented yet.
So we can strike that. And then I also had a question about, sorry, I'm interjecting here.
Go ahead.
The prioritized spending, the ongoing work at solid waste transfer facility. I mean, that still is, we're waiting for that assessment, the study. So I think we can leave that in as well. So should we take the parking meters out? Because it's basically funded. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
And then Rocket, are you comfortable? Is the rest of the board comfortable if we change the first guidance regarding values to adhere to the objectives of the climate action plan?
Sure.
Everyone okay with that?
Sure, and also, I mean, we have essentially that mentioned in detailed guidance, so it's kind of represented in that way. I do think it's helpful to still state in the values, though, in some capacity, whether it's, you know, striking that or modifying that line, but just because we do have a joint resolution, we do have these commitments that our community was very involved in, as were the boards at the time. So making sure that that's in our values, I think, is important in some capacity.
Okay, so now we just need the percentage.
Oh, yeah.
Which we had.
Do we have
last year we had 5%.
We had 5% last year. That was sort of a rebound after.
I was going to say inflation did a terrible spike, and
Yeah.
the question is, how much of the elephant has the snake digested?
Yeah.
Do you know, is there still more catching up to do to catch up with the inflationary impact, or do you think that's been accomplished? I don't know.
We have 5%. I'm sort of agnostic here.
I mean, I think
it's guidance.
Yeah.
I mean, if we want to choose a number, that's fine with me. You know, I think. Yeah, go ahead.
We're going to be presented with the requests of the departments and the recommendations of the town manager, presumably with guidance from the finance director, and then that's what we're going to work with. So it's going to be something between 1 and 300%. So,
yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. I don't want to get too bogged down on the guidance because we still have to do the capital requests. So, I mean, if we are all generally okay with this, and you know, it's a process, right? Like we're going to go through many meetings and we're going to get cost numbers and things like that. You know, so I don't want us just to get bogged down on a document that's just basically like broad parameters.
Lanny Rocket. So when we look at this, I know that Hartford has the climate plan that we have. I'm just wondering if our expectations that we're putting out there for us to reach this by saying, you know, reach the climate plan are not realistic. I know that it's a destination more than a goal, I guess, for us. We need to always keep improving, but I don't know if we need to hamstring us by saying that we are definitely going to meet this. I mean, if we make a constant improving step every year, is that not enough for us, or do we have to have this set in stone?
Well, don't we adopt like a certain target we want to hit? Like,
well, that's the problem. Is that when you set that,
it's what's there. We got.
Well, what I'm saying that when you say you have a target out there,
we do.
Well,
I'm not just saying it.
Follow me out. When you say that you have a target out there, that means that you have to put all that spending towards that target instead of working consistently towards that goal. All right, not at a certain time frame to reach that goal. If you work towards that, just a goal without a date, I think you're making progress.
Allie?
Well, Lanny, are you, so what, I guess how I read this budget guidance is, you know, one, it's guidance, it's not binding. And, you know, two, nothing in here about the mention of the climate action plan suggests to me that, okay, we must, you know, meet these goals in this budget guidance document. So I'm just curious if something feels too finite in the budget guidance.
The second item on detailed guidance is prioritize funding items that apply to the implementation of the climate action plan.
Right, which I think we should do. And that's, you know, that's the level of specificity that's included in the other detailed guidance items. Prioritize infrastructure maintenance, prioritize funding the ongoing work at the solid waste transfer facility. I don't see the climate action plan guidance any more specific than the other detailed guidance we have here.
I just feel that it has the potential to bog us down in achieving some of the other capital improvement plans.
This is bogging us down. Well, let's do the budget guidance.
May I just make a quick comment on this?
Yes.
When I look at this bigger picture, I think we have too much guidance.
Oh God. Okay. Look,
right?
Guys, it's a guidance document.
But honestly, there are like 20 bullet points on here, and at some point, the process is that the department heads work with the staff, they go to the town manager, and then it gets presented in tandem to us.
Yeah,
I think
and they have guidance.
The best guidance.
They seem to have managed to bring us budget requests every year, even with the guidance out.
Oh, I completely agree.
Why are you taking defensive tone towards this?
Because look, we're wasting a lot of time on this and we're getting off topic. And we've got other things that the staff are here waiting for us to discuss with them.
I appreciate that.
8:35. And I don't think you need to take a defensive tone towards it.
To finish my point, perhaps there are 3 or 4 core principles that we as a board can agree on that would be sufficient guidance, because I think otherwise we get bogged down in this, and I was just contributing to that. Does this bullet point, does that bullet point make sense? I think, what if it's just same as with the community safety review presentations we have, where we have a pretty standardized rubric that we're asking everyone to be fair. The same with every department head, we just say, we'd like you to be able to justify these. For us to say preemptively, it should be 5% or 10%. I understand it's just guidance, but what do we know? We're just pulling that number out of nowhere because 5% sounds good or 10%.
Well, no, it's looking back at prior years' budgets, looking at the inflation rates, looking at the costs that we know are coming down the pipeline. We're not just putting numbers.
It's still a little bit of blending.
Yes, I'm going to call it. See if Dan's on. When Ally gets back, let's see if we have 4 votes to adopt this guidance and give it to the town manager. I mean, this is not efficient. We have 4 people who are good with the guidance as we've revised it and discussed it to give to the town manager.
And we don't even have to do a vote.
No, we don't have to do a vote. I'm cool with it.
I'm okay with it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm okay with it.
Dan, okay with it?
I'm okay with it. But well, I mean, I think the thing that's still outstanding is the percent increase. Like, if you want to specify I mean, maybe we could just take that line out.
Sure. Yep.
Is that
People with that?
imprudent? Is there anything imprudent about that?
Look, we'll trust them to bring us a budget that provides the services that people need and funds everything, and to do it in a way that doesn't result in like a massive tax increase. I think we can all agree that. our department heads
tax
are-
revolt. You all know your voters.
Right, I mean, part of my budget process is to look at the percentage of increase on all the.
Okay,
like,
well, it's 5. Is there any reason why we would change that?
Well, what I'm saying is if you want to keep that in, do we need to include that language about,
I would recommend it.
but notwithstanding the healthcare benefits and things like that? Like, I don't know how to word that.
Yeah, what would your, Mike, because you proposed that, what would your proposed
I
word
think I would
be?
just say, but to look what is the actual language?
Right now, it just says, consider a 5% increase to fund needs.
5% increase to fund, 5% increase, not including employee benefits. Spending,
No, that would include employee benefits. 5% would cover the employee benefits.
I'm told that, what?
A 5% increase in the budget, would that not cover the employee benefits?
What are you saying?
It would need offsetting cuts to departments, is my understanding.
How about each department justifies the hell out of their budget? Because every department is gonna have different needs.
Jim, I think that was all right. Do we still have 4?
The
for
cost
that?
increase of asphalt may have changed radically more than the cost increases necessary for the assessor's office. Right, so I think to use a flat rate increase, even as guidance, is a bit heavy handed.
Let's just strike it.
Let's try it.
All right.
We got 4. Okay, we're moving on.
I will edit that and.
Yeah, so we can get it like in the minutes.
Thank you, Kim.
So we're striking that bullet point entirely, is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, CIP requests. We got an overview of some of these last meeting. It seemed like there were some we could go ahead and make a decision on at this point, maybe not all of them. But I think one of the first ones was the Parks and Rec request. So that was for improvements to the Lyman Point Park Playground. That's a $325,000 cost. It looks like there are 2 phases. Scott, would they both be at the same time, basically?
Come over here to the mic.
Yeah, thanks. Just introduce yourself.
Yeah, Scott Hausler, Director of Parks and Recreation. So the first phase, we already have funding
Okay, you
available
got that.
for, right? So
Guys,
it
can we
would,
listen to Scott?
it would be a second phase. It's a project that will probably take, it's gonna take more than 1 year.
Yeah.
To complete, but it would allow us to implement it, so.
Okay, so basically, you've got 100,000 in your reserve, and then it's 255 that you're basically asking for.
225, so for 325 total.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, looks like, okay. Thoughts on this one, board? It's something we can decide now whether we want to include it. I mean, it's a budget process.
Just trying to, the questions I have.
Rocket and then Lanny.
I have doubts about this, Scott. I love what you do in your department, all this, but I have doubts about the cost of this and how much the underutilization of the park right now is due to the design of the park. And if there's a way that we
Is it
can.
underutilized?
There's no, I have to correct you on that. There's no underutilization of this particular park. It has a tremendous amount of use, not only for public events that we hold, concerts, movies in the park, that sort of thing, but also just the general day-to-day use from general residents that utilize the playground. That is not an accessible playground. I mean, there's no access to it safely to the playground from a sidewalk, from the parking lot. Even to the opposite side of the park, you cannot access it accessibly. So, we've got some challenges there to provide a facility that's going to be inclusive for all and have the ability to serve all of those that currently use it, but then also those that will, be kind of moving into the area as well. But we have tremendous amount of use of this park, not only for our own programs, but just general user use.
I see. So it's more about creating greater accessibility.
greater accessibility and enhancement. So we're also taking a 30-year playground and trying to, make it more accessible and usable for all. So
that makes sense. Thank you.
Okay.
I have the same argument I had last time, is that although I don't disagree that Lima Point Park could use a facelift, Hartford is growing to the extent that, especially on Prospect Street, you're getting more residences out there. And we need to look at acquiring more land for parks. And as I said last time, we should really be looking at Prospect Street by the river to turn that into a park. And that's where I think that we need to embrace some of the spending, is on allocating more land, because you're talking about people coming from Prospect Street across the road, which is a safety hazard, coming to the Lyman Point Park to utilize it. And you have such a usage right now in Lyman Point Park. When you get Prospect Street apartments filled, you're going to overutilize the park. And what do we do then? So again, I'm not opposed to a facelift for Lyman Point Park. I'm just wondering if the broader goal for us should be to acquire more park space because of the growing needs of the town of Hartford. And if what we have now, I know is not perfect, but it's working to a certain extent.
Right.
Yes, Scott.
Just quickly, I need to make it perfectly clear. We're not pitching this project and trying to make this enhancement just because of a residential unit that's being built across the street. Mm-hmm. It certainly is going to have a huge impact on it. We're trying to take care of what we have and put the funds into this particular park that needs to be enhanced and needs to be available to the entire community. Right now, it's hard for us to do that. It is a very functional facility to some, but not for all.
I don't disagree whatsoever with that, nor do I think that we should hold people up, but I just really think that we have to increase parks,
So, hey, love to have another park. So seriously, but that goes through a good community planning process as well. When we do our needs assessment every 5 years, we look at all of our parks and all of our uses and ask the community, for input. So those are some of the things that we do ask, and we'll ask next year when we do our needs assessment about new park facilities, or if there are some ideas that are out there, working with developers, working with nonprofits, other organizations to try to make that change. It's not always the town's responsibility on some areas of the community. It can be a private public partnership. So those are important to think about before we just not take care of what we've got. So
Sorry, Dunley?
No. So within Parks and Recreation, you looking for funds for new equipment. Okay. Is there anything broken, like, that needs to be fixed? I mean, we need improvements there, yes, but is there anything that's
the playground?
No. Is there anything within the Parks and Rec department that is, if we don't fix it, we're not going to use it, we're not going to have it, kind of thing? Like I saw a note about the park, the Waba ice issues there. I mean, that's a given thing.
So that's something that's broken, but we're fixing it, right? So,
okay.
But can't think of
So this is the
anything off
highest
the
demand.
top of my hand.
It's the highest demand right now for parks.
Well, I think it's a big demand for our capital plan related to playground enhancements and improvements. So all of our parks will go through this, right? And this is one of the main park facilities because of its use. And during COVID,
when prior, once that started, we saw a tremendous demand, not only by the general public, but, local groups and organizations utilizing the space as an outdoor recreation venue, to hold public meetings, to hold classes, those sorts of things that hadn't taken place before. Those continue. So we just feel like this will be a tremendous opportunity for the town of Hartford to develop within our 5 villages a facility that could be considered a town green, an area that's accessible, visible for all. We don't have that in really in any of our villages. We do have parks in each of our village, but we don't have a community space that can be utilized similar to, Lebanon's a different community park location in the center of town, but that's the closest that we can get to having that concept. And we feel like it'll be a huge, not only physical benefit to the community, emotional benefit and economical benefit too, by doing this project. So.
Ally, then Kim, and Heidi.
Yeah, I just wanted to briefly say I am supportive of this, and especially what was striking to me, if I'm understanding what's on page 71 of our packet, the graph or the Excel sheet that lays out all of the different pieces of equipment and what's past useful life. If I'm understanding that correctly, it's like almost every single structure is past its useful life. So the more that we are deferring these kinds of projects, like that's just going to keep bumping down the line. So I think at a certain point we have to decide we're making a commitment to improving that infrastructure. And this is, this park is a welcome call to folks who are crossing the bridge and just entering our community. And there will certainly be a need based off the reasons you described. So anyway, I'm supportive of it.
Kim?
And also Dan has his hand up.
Did you have a comment? Or just...
I do.
Okay.
If I don't know if you saw, I emailed some questions about the funding source, but it wasn't completely made clear to me when I got the response from Gail. But just to begin with, the beginning of the memo, I think where it says, the total amount is 325,000. It says park reserve 100,000, general fund 255. Is that just that should be 225?
225.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that just is why I kept asking about 255. But the other question related was, so if I'm understanding this correctly, and I was trying to get a sense of what the total amount of reserve funds were for this, because it seems like we had quite a bit established, and then part of that had been going for the electric mowers, but we then ended up using 72,000 of that to pay for ARPA. I'm trying to get a sense of how much reserve funds are already established for this.
So there was 25,000 originally, because we just started the playground reserve.
Okay.
Based on
in 24.
Yeah, maybe 2023.
Okay.
So there's two deposits have been put into that. It was reduced, I think, last year, but and then we had a contribution of $75,000 that added to that that I think Gail explained to put in the $100,000 total. The other reserves, the ARPA funding, that was outside of any of our reserve funds. That was the ARPA funds was separate to purchase the mowers and the skid steer. We did put a request for ARPA funds for the playground enhancements, but that was a general enhanced, contribution to start doing some work with the playgrounds. And this has just evolved over the year as a top priority and project for us.
Okay, so
and that's just playground reserves.
Right. So there's two reserve accounts. One, which is capital Parks and Rec playground specifically, which according to this is only $25,000 as of fiscal year 24.
Correct.
Then there's another one that's called Parks Reserve Fund for future capital expenses, repairs and projects. And out of that one, it says in the narrative, revised to fund 2 mowers, 72,000 out of ARPA, no reserve deposits in 24 or 20. So that's separate stuff?
That's separate. There's probably some language things in there related to those reserves, because we've never had a playground specific
Okay.
reserve. So that particular fund, like we purchased a truck a couple years ago. So we used reserves to purchase the truck. So we did put some, there was a thought process of putting money in there to, do some like the mowers, but because the ARPA funds were available, we were going down that direction.
Okay.
We did not fund that reserve account for
So-
mowers from money for mowers.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
correct.
that
Yep.
one doesn't have anything to do with playgrounds.
Correct.
So then, when we say $100,000 from reserves, we only have 25 so far. So you're talking 3 more years of $25,000.
No, there's we have a end of the year transfer of $75,000 to make it $100,000.
From like unencumbered?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, for
That
projects.
answers my question.
Sorry about
I
that.
was like,
I should have
where
said
are those
encumbered
reserves?
from the beginning, so.
Okay, that's.
So that gives us the 100.
Okay,
Yep.
that's great. And then, so then the remaining 225, not 255.
Correct.
Are you thinking about a specific source? Or what's the funding source for that? You thinking, and over how much time?
You all.
Okay.
General
So,
fund.
General
in this
fund,
budget,
yep.
right? Yep.
Yeah.
General fund, and so this
Mhm.
is something that you would like to have funded fully in the 25 budget?
Correct. So we can complete it. Yep.
Okay.
But that's obviously.
And so those sources can be within the operating budget, within local option tax, with potential unassigned fund, additional funds. So those are kind of our options for where that 225 comes from.
That's a good consideration. I think I put in their general fund. So
Okay.
how you folks are able to make it work with the town manager, then we'd be happy to, accept.
Thank you.
That
I
works
have
out.
been super confused about that part, and now I think, and to panel Dennis Brown, I think we do need to take care of what we have before we build something new in this particular context. So I'm definitely, in theory, in support of this, and we'll look forward to figuring out exactly where that 225 comes from.
Excellent.
I think Dan had his hand up and
Oh,
then.
yes. Go ahead, Dan.
Thanks. I'm supportive of this, but I also want to remind everyone that, the American Disabilities Act of 1972 requires that there's access to everyone. So I don't think this is something that we should put off. It's a potential lawsuit if we don't make things accessible to the town. So I just want people to keep that in mind.
Thank you, Dan.
And I'm sure there are grants out there that you would pursue them.
Oh, we'll make every attempt to. There's just no guarantee, but there are some opportunities out there that we'll establish that need matches, that type of thing. So we'll definitely pursue that.
Heidi, did you have a comment or question?
Yes, I do. Heidi Dutoit, River Junction, Vermont. I attended last meeting and I heard this and I did a lot of thinking. And this park is utilized by so many people. Every time I come to this building, every time I drive by, I've lived in this town for 50+ years. I utilize that swim pool, the Hartford swimming pool. Every summer, drove my bike there. This is like the swimming pool. It is home to so many children, so many families. Not only is it the park, but it's the entire green. It's not just for the playground. You have groups coming here, you have Juneteenth here, you have the movies here, you have the Halloween parties here, you have car washes out here for the teams, you have the Christmas trees sold here. This is a place where people come to join and have a group celebration. You have everything happening here. This is Hartford. This is what it speaks to me. This is Hartford. And if we make the mistake of not improving this, we make a big mistake. And that's what it speaks to me. And the reason why I made the post on Listserv and on that Facebook page is because we do still have ARPA funds. And nothing against you, Lori, but AUDs is only going to benefit 10 to 15 families, where this is going to benefit thousands and thousands of individuals every single year for years to come. And this is so much better use of ARPA funds. We don't have to utilize tax funds. We can utilize COVID relief funds. And this is speaking to Hartford and everyone in Hartford. And all I'm asking is you make the right decision.
Thank you, Heidi.
Thank you.
So I would also mention that this park is accessible, like there's public transportation, stops nearby. So that's another nice aspect of it. So, I mean, I'm generally supportive of this. I mean, I think the idea here is we're going to choose what we want, like what we agree to today that goes in, right? The capital expenses, so that when they plan the budget and do everything, we have a sense of like, you know, what we've agreed to, right? It is a process, things change, but I mean, do we have a consensus? Do we have 4 people who say like, yes, let's fund it in this budget? I would do that.
I'll say yes, but it's awful easy to say yes now.
Well, it
And
is,
then when we get to the end and we find out that we're, you know, pushing our budget.
Yeah,
so
I mean,
it's-
that's part of
Yeah,
the process. I mean, I think there's things on here, requests for tonight, we would say, nah, we're not interested in putting this in, you know?
Well, I mean,
that's what the exercise is for.
Right, but what I'm getting at is that I am interested in doing this, but when push comes to shove, is there a way to scale it back somewhat? You know, that's the point I'm getting, is do we have to commit? I don't think we have to commit to the whole thing. I mean, if we can commit to a yes.
Well, doesn't it
but what I'm
help
saying
the
is we can
budget
scale it back.
process to know what we've committed and things like that as you go ahead and make your budget? I mean, if it's like, maybe it's in, maybe it's not, we'll see it. I think it makes it harder for the department heads.
Yeah, I'm saying it, we can say it's in, but when push comes to shove.
Yeah, of course.
We're gonna have to look at possibly cuts somewhere, so.
Well, yeah, that's the budget process. All right.
I was initially skeptical of this, but with clarification, I think it's great. I think to me, this speaks to what I've been wanting is aspirational governance. And I think that improving this park, which is heavily utilized, and making it handicap accessible, it's just like continuing to build a jewel in the heart of our community. So I think it's good. I support it. And I understand too, Lanny, your point. I mean, barring if there's some sort of unforeseen another pandemic or some sort of act of God that we need to adjust our budget for come the end of the year, then we do that. But for now, I'm happy, comfortable supporting.
So we got 3, we have a 4th.
Yeah.
Okay. Dan, okay. All right, thanks, Scott. Our next thing to look at is the police department request. So the chief wants $6 million.
Did anybody have a problem with pages like 76 through like 79 getting printed out on your PDF? I can't, it never came out in PDF. So the image too big or something? Or is that a blank plate?
I think it's a blank plate on the, I see what you're saying.
73, it's got 73 is blank.
I have 73.
I see text.
73 of the 140 page document?
Yeah, that's the police requests.
I don't have it.
Do you not have it?
No, it didn't come out on my.
Website, it's on there.
I'm gonna have to go to the website.
Okay, there were a couple of things, we mentioned last time. Of course, looming over all of this discussion, of course, is ultimately like a new public safety police facility, which is going to be something with a bond. There are maybe some initial like planning phase funds that we could agree to put in the budget. And then there are a couple of requests, right? So to increase the reserves for the incident response trailer, right?
Increase the reserves for the dispatch sent
For the
council.
dispatch.
The community response command post would stay the same if
Okay.
approved at 20,000. Or 25, is it 20 or 25,000 a year? I think it's 20.
I see one, right? You increase one reserve amount by 30,000. So
Correct.
that it's 50 annually. That's the communication center, right?
Correct.
Is that and then just put in reserves over a 5-year period for the trailer, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, currently the communication center is reserve fund is 20,000 a year. We want to increase it to 50 to add a 4th terminal within 3 years.
Okay. And then 20/3. Questions on this, Kim?
Yeah, so right now we're just talking about communication center and the
Yeah, just
trailer.
increasing those reserves.
This would be one of those, and I think Gail is on now, and maybe you have an opinion, but this would be one of those cases in which we debate. I mean, like, I'm all in favor of putting funds in reserve for things that we know we're going to need. But I wonder if that balance between what to save for and what to borrow for lease or whatever the options are, makes sense in terms of how much something's gonna cost by the time we have accumulated the reserves. I'm just curious if you've looked at that in terms of, like, if you want, if you're recommending this trailer for, like, would you prefer to have it next year? And if you did, does it actually make more sense to just lease that thing now, or, municipal lease, or purchase it with the interest rate? I mean, I guess interest rates are really high right now, so maybe ideally not. So just wanted to throw that out there, but otherwise I'm very much in favor of putting in reserves for the things we know we're going to need. So if it's not an immediate need, then yeah, maybe that's it.
You have questions for the chief on that? I mean, I would be in favor of the request to increase the reserves.
Well, can I see if you want to answer my question?
Yeah,
Of,
okay.
like, is that something you considered?
About the trailer?
Yeah.
The trailer is really just we prefer a mobile command post, like an RV setup, which are much more, we're kind of minimizing and saying, well, we can do it with a trailer for now, and then in the future, maybe down the line after bigger items are discussed or approved years, we would consider something different. But this is more of we don't have anything. It's our first step in the process, and it would give us something to operate out of on a major scene. Again, it's not what we would hope for overall. It's not our wish list, but it is what we are willing to accept, and understanding that it is, tax dollars that go to this. So we are willing to accept and understand that a trailer is not what we would ultimately like, but it is something we can work with.
What would you rather have?
Oh, I think we'd rather have a mobile command post, an RV type style, but you're talking, a lot more money than that. And is it something we could utilize and justify the expense on? Probably not when you're talking, $400,000 to $500,000. So a command post with our new Tahoes that we're getting for cruisers, they can certainly pull a trailer like this. So we have the other parts of our program in place that a trailer would be sufficient, and without being or looking greedy in the process.
And that you think in 27 or 28, $100,000 will do it?
Who knows with inflation, but I think it's a good start.
Okay.
If we get there, we can always say, hey, we might need to wait a couple more years and ask for more.
Lynn?
What are we talking about for a trailer here for $100,000?
Well, it's not just a trailer, it's all the equipment inside. And it's all it's all the infrastructure inside the trailer that goes with. I mean, the purchase of a trailer is going to be obviously a heavy duty trailer. Fire department has some. It might be bigger than those, and then what goes inside that for radio
20-foot trailer maybe, or
I haven't done the research. It was Lieutenant Howell that looked into it, so I couldn't really answer a lot of that.
Mr. Chair, I'm supportive of this.
Okay. Thoughts? All right, I think we're supportive of the increase to the reserves in those two instances. In this, you mentioned eventually a need for a new police facility, essentially, and laid out looks like a 6-year. I mean, I know it's very early, a very 6-year sort of phase, right? And so in phase 1, sort of a needs assessment feasibility study, right? Mm-hmm. So that would be somewhere estimated between 60 and 70,000. Is that something you're requesting we allocate money for in this budget that's coming up?
Yeah, that would be our first step. Okay. I mean, I would love to have it before July 1st of next year to get the process rolling. But if it's next year, July 1st, then we will, obviously roll with it. The needs assessment, it's a space and needs assessment that, the project management company would come in and do. So what I learned 2 weeks ago, Lainey asked me some questions and I couldn't answer them. And because I said we were taking a class and asked me after the class was over, what I learned was we don't know what we need. We put down 12,000 because that's what we were looking at around the state. We may be looking at 15,000 square feet. This is a 50-year building.
Yeah.
So what are our growth needs? In the dollar amount per square foot of $500 a square foot, which I received from a local contracting Construction company project manager is low. They're saying it's about $750 a square foot. So it's a considerable difference. But we won't know what we need for square footage until the assessment is done. So I'm looking for the company or the class we took. The instructor said 50 to 65,000 roughly for the needs and space assessment for them to come in and do it, or for an architect firm to do it. So that's what I'm really looking for now.
And that,
Valley and then.
and that would be out of the general fund.
However, it was funded. Yeah, I mean, again, I'd love to have it before July 1st. We can get this rolling faster, but if not, then July 1st, general fund, yeah.
So I realized that when we spoke last about this, that location is super important for this. But this brings up the question of such a high dollar amount. Is this something, I mean, we're talking land, okay? Right. So is this something that could be placed on, the downward side of the landfill as a main station, and then put like small substation trailers perhaps in the villages, or small substations somewhere else, to try to give you more reach throughout the community?
Yeah, I certainly think that's a possibility. Where actually Chief Cooney is actually willing to put a desk at his Queechee station, fire station for us. There's certainly opportunities like that. The problem would come down to staffing.
Yeah.
We are gaining on our staffing levels, but we're not 100% yet.
So what would be your vision of what you would do with a main station versus a substation?
And beyond the scope.
Well, no, because it's not, because we're talking about, if we're able to utilize the land at the landfill.
But we don't know until we do the assessment, right? We're just sort of speculating.
The only question at hand is whether or not we want to consider.
We want to give the 60
supporting
to
an
70.
assessment. Yeah, and within this budget year, or put.
But you flew right by the trailer, so I assume that you just automatically gonna let that go, right? You flew by the trailer.
We just talked about it.
I know, so.
Have for the majority votes.
We're supportive of it generally.
Okay.
Of the reserve.
I'm confused.
We had 2 requests for reserve increases. I believe we had a majority of support. If my memory serves. And then now there's this request, if we want to fund like a assessment for a new building, a police building. So do we want to put that in? I know he'd prefer to have it this fiscal year than next, but. Right.
My sense is this is obviously a multi-year project. I personally would rather punt on this for a little bit, because I'm actually not opposed to funding it this year. But I think, seeing as we have a new town manager, I think I would feel comfortable and good letting our town manager get onboarded and just get a better sense of whether or not that might fit in with this year's programming. In which case, with that guidance, I could see myself being persuaded that way. It's with all things that we've had to do in terms of engineering studies or other studies, it seems to be within the range of that cost. So whether it happens this year or next year, whatever, I guess I don't really have as much of a good intuitive sense of how urgent is this that we should start it this year versus next. And this is from our perspective. Obviously, I understand from the department's perspective. Sooner the better. So I guess my recommendation to the board would be that we revisit this conversation in a little bit, maybe at some point at which the town managers had more time to have his own assessment to be able to give us a recommendation.
It's a process, and we can revisit this, but it seems like we agreed we want to at least say the reserve increases are in there just for planning.
Yeah.
Manny?
I don't agree. The assessment is going to be firm no matter down the road or not. It's whether John's on board with the idea or not, which we're going to have to do an assessment at some point. And that's going to stand firm whether this year or next year. And it's going to be a lot cheaper to do it this year than it is next year. So I would support.
That may be true, and I think we could add it in during our budget process. We don't have to, we got some flexibility, just to see what it looks like when we get the budget, and say, hey, let's do this assessment, let's put it in the budget, or let's try and free up some money so that they can start it now, right? I mean, we have flexibility on this stuff. I mean, that's why we're gonna spend November and December here every week doing budgets.
Well, you're looking for a 4 vote in support of moving ahead with this feasibility study, right? Is that what you're trying to get right now?
If we wanna do it now, yeah. If we have
Yes.
4 votes for it.
Mr. Chair,
But
procedure.
we have someone else who basically has given us, his opinion that we should just punt it and take it up later in the budget process.
Well, I just think that
I'm good either way.
procedurally, we are tasked with looking over the budget as a whole and presenting it to taxpayers. This, to me, especially within this given budget year, strikes me as an expenditure which through normal process, we would have presented to us through the town manager and so forth. I don't think is fair to ask John for his professional opinion on this, given that this is his second day on the job. So I think that in process and us not usurping that process and the role that is, in my understanding, traditionally held by the town manager, that I think that, which is that this is a current fiscal year approved, taxpayer approved budget, which for me, it just seems weird that we would be line item approving expenditures as the select board, right? So I think I would rather have, because it may be that there's an internal assessment within staff and management that this could be deferred 3 to 5 years, in which case, yes, the cost is going to go up, but why spend it if we don't need it? And this is where I don't feel like I'm in touch enough with the day-to-day operation to say I have a definitive decision on this.
Kim?
Am I hearing you correctly that what you're saying is you're not interested in trying to find a spot in the fiscal 24 budget that we're in right now for this money, but that you're open to looking at it being in the 25 budget that we're going to be working on?
I am completely fine if we pull from this budget as well. I just don't see that as our role to make that determination.
Right. So if the police chief and the finance director and the town manager come to us and say, we've found this funding source to be able to do this in fiscal year 24, we would consider that. Otherwise, are you conceptually open to it being presented as part of the 25 budget?
I'm completely open to supporting it this year, next year, any year.
Okay, I think we're
on the same. I think just for me, we're in a period of transition at the leadership level. I think that if we commit to this, then we are committing to, in some respect, to some process of that. And I think having a new town manager and for us to just say, yes, let's go ahead with it just because we have the funding, to me, doesn't feel like the most respectful way to treat the fact that we have a new town manager who would be dealing with the chief and so forth. And this is no reflection on my relationship or my perspective on the chief or the department or anything like that. It's more to do with just trying to be procedurally respectful.
How does a feasibility study undervaluate the town manager, though? I guess I'm trying to understand how it would undermine the town manager if we move ahead with the feasibility study to see if we need a new police station, I guess.
Taking out of the current budget.
Right.
Sorry. So I think we're all on the same page on this.
We are not management.
Right.
That's just the fact, right? So this year's budget was approved by us and then approved by the taxpayers. So for us to get in line item by line item and say, okay, well, let's approve $60,000 or any amount for something that would frankly be operational and not within something that was taxpayer approved, I don't think is our place to do without buy-in from the current leadership.
Well, yeah, we're just saying whether do we want to have this money in there just earmarked for the 25 budget.
Yeah, it's 25, 26. It's not talking about this year's budget.
I know, we're not
It's
talking
next
about-
year's budget.
Yeah.
We're not operating out of the town.
If they come to
manager's,
us at a meeting and say, hey, we found money in this year's budget to do it, then we can say yeah or nay. But I mean, all we're doing is saying, hey, put 60 to 70,000 in for this in the FY25 budget, and then we'll see if we want to keep it in when we go through our budget.
Oh, okay, so I guess I'm saying that I'm even supportive of it this year.
So it's
so long
not-
as we
but
have-
yeah, okay, but you would be supportive. Let's put aside doing something this year because maybe someone will come up with something.
Okay.
But let's just say, all right, let's say we're going to do this in the next year budget. So that money will be in there. So they know
It's one
that's
of
in
many
there.
assumptions. And after you see a bottom line number from finance, you'll know whether that's a good assumption or whether we should make some changes. Yeah.
Okay, so the next thing we'll talk to Chief.
So we have 4 votes on this, yes? 4 A's, 4
We have
A's.
4, yeah, don't we?
Okay, I'm fine.
I mean, yeah, we're.
Yeah.
4 supportive
of it.
statements, not votes.
So we got Chief Cooney up there. Yeah, do you want to go over some of your requests again, or just remind us of them?
Wait, aren't we next on Lori? No. Oh, no, sorry.
No, they're gonna find it first.
Yeah, they're already up there, so.
Sure.
Yeah.
Obviously, we've got two of these items already kind of in motion. Through the construction management award you made last select board meeting. So Estes and Gallup is currently doing cost estimations with Studio Nexus on the storage and equipment building at the VA Cutoff Road site. And they are doing pricing and construction cost recommendations for the Station 2 renovation now with Studio Nexus. So the intent there, the deadlines I've given them is that for my budget presentation to you folks on November 7th, then we'll have a number that you'll have to consider on financing options that, I'll discuss with the town manager and the finance director, and we'll have some options for you available for fire's budget presentation on the 7th of November. The other three, which includes improvements to the public safety site, to including, a secure storage area, additional parking on the site, and then a future location for a combined training building. Those have a lot of moving parts to them. Obviously, if we are prospectively thinking about a new police facility and things like that, then obviously some of these items should probably be tabled till that decision is made on further improving the site of public safety. And then until the future of the Hartford transfer facility is decided on, I think that kind of lays the roadmap for, public safety training and other uses for the transfer site facility and things like that. So right now, I'm only looking, we're moving on two of these capital improvement items, and we should have some answers for you during the budget cycle as to how you choose for funding.
Okay. Lynn?
Scott, do you ever see the fire department outgrowing the public safety location as it is right now, land with?
I don't. We preliminary you and I had this discussion, I think, at the last meeting.
Right.
I think rather than concentrating public safety in one location, is that we move very much like we've experimented in Queechee. The best way is to deliver resources the fastest and be in these locations to reduce response time and to get folks kind of equalized for that.
But I mean your main station.
Yeah, I don't think so, Lanny, because I think what you do is you take the fleets and you take the personnel, and then you say, you're underserving this area. Similar to what we did with Queechee, we identified those gaps in services and we start spreading out our resources there. I don't think you need to have a larger facility.
My point is, it would pay to invest in this site then, definitely for fire.
I think you would do some renovations.
Yeah,
obviously.
definitely pay to invest.
I mean, we know that the heating system's not great, and then there's other things to do. And if we are studying police relocation, a larger police facility, and other uses for that, maybe in the study we incorporate what the re-envisioning is of the public safety complex on the VA Cutoff Road as well with that study as well.
So you could do like a public safety bond, right? At some point, maybe where you're just asking for funds for both police and fire.
So from a fire standpoint, how well does the layout of the PD side of public safety fit the needs? Why I'm asking the question is, are we going to have to look at like knocking that building down and totally starting from scratch to meet your needs as a fire department?
I don't think so. I think, my experience with, architects in what little renovations we've done so far, and I'm excited to show John tomorrow. He gets a little tour of our facilities to show him what's been done in the past. But in the brief experience I've had with doing some internal reservations to make changes inside public safety, is they can reimagine spaces within current four walls quite well. And I think the bones of the facility are good and strong.
It's major savings because we won't have to be groundbreaking or anything like that.
I think you can do a lot within the complex to make things work.
That will save us some dollars down the road. Then. Okay, that's a major plus.
So Scott, with the things tonight you wanted us to consider committee two?
Pretty much only, I'm just here to see if you had any further questions.
Okay.
We've moved on the big items,
Yeah.
which is the two. I've
Okay.
asked Estes and Gallup to present you those numbers combined for
Yeah.
those two, because there's two projects happening, the Queechee project and the VA cutoff road project, to separate them but combine them into costs. So when you decide to make decisions on funding, you have those breakout numbers.
So one more question.
Oh, yeah, sure.
So in terms of station two, with the addition of the living quarters, will that size serve the function for a substation for years to come?
Yeah, so I envisioned it with 4 out there, even though we only have 2.
Right.
And we're reusing one of the spaces for exercise and fitness equipment and things like that. We've made some changes. We're thinking about, our future expansion and emergency location for the dispatch centers to move to if something happens in public safety and we have to relocate. So considering a space for in a temporary purpose that could happen. We talked to the chief about, we added a office out there specifically for the police department with outside access. The PD unit on patrol on a winter night in Queechee doesn't have to sit in the snowbank and monitor cars, that he can come and he'll have his own office at the PD at the station too.
As far as another bay though for a piece of apparatus, you don't think you need that out there?
I don't think so. I think right now it's currently designed for a fire suppression unit and an EMS unit. And I think in any case, no matter what the configuration of the fire apparatus is or the EMS unit that's there, I think you just need one of each in that location.
In the old days, we ran a tanker and engine.
Yeah.
Now we have an engine
and
a
ambulance.
tanker.
Yeah,
together
you
in one
combine
unit.
the resources.
Okay, that's usually okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Chief Sheldon, as well. Our next thing is to hear from Lori with an update on proposed using some ARPA funds for a housing development program. We don't have to decide this tonight. This is just to get an update. It's ARPA funds, so we would probably tackle it during the budget. So, if, Lori, you just want to give us an update, that would be excellent.
Right, so you received the memo at the last meeting. Sorry, I wasn't able to be here to answer questions at that time. I was supposed to be at a conference and ended up having COVID, so. So really what we're talking about is really the development of the beginning of a process to develop a housing development program. And looking at ARPA as one of the funding resources to really go through that process. So back in January, when the select board said, okay, there's something here, but we'll put earmark $150,000. And so what we did at that point is we started looking at what can that be working for. We originally talked about accessory dwelling units and small scale multifamily units. And so our first thing that we did was really, I pulled together a team of people from the RPC, Regional Planning Commission, Vital Communities, and we started putting together a what ended up being a wonderful event in earlier this year in May. And it's called the Home Creators Expo, really wanting to engage in with the community as to what they envision as a way to bring this to fruition. And looking at accessory dwelling units in the smaller scale being one of the easier ways to get housing out there and doing it in a way that's partnering with the private sector. Because we know that this process of increasing much needed housing in Hartford can't be done just by municipal and by state and by federal. It has to be in partnership with the private sector. So we started looking at that, and 130 people plus came out on that date and for 7 hours, and we had workshops and experts out there. And what we concluded at the end of that, and what we heard and what we saw people were asking for was, kind of confirmed what we were already understanding when we had our community discussions. And that's, people want to do this. They don't know how to do it. They need technical support, endurance of doing that. We pulled together a bunch of vendors and experts in the field, as well as people from the state offices in terms of water, wastewater. How do you do this? How do you convert your house into taking a section of it and making it into an accessory dwelling, or do you want to convert a space or add a new structure on your property to do that? Or there are buildings that we know from our research that we've done for the our housing plan is that there are many large homes that are being used by very few people. Those could either expand into accessory dwelling units as well as multifamily. So the proposal that we really are moving forward with is two-pronged, and that's to put aside some of these funds to actually hire consultants that can provide for free guidance and assistance to individuals interested in pursuing this. But they're going to have to, and that could be as simple as coming out to their property, giving them some analysis of their structures, whether or not they have any site conditions that need to be attended to, and so forth, and putting together a group of experts in that area. And then the second piece of it is to provide some funding that could help address some of those other types of costs that you have in trying to construct. Any type of construction is going to be much more than what we can provide in a small grant, but those grants can help leverage conventional loans. They can help make sure that people who, if they have additional expenses for doing surveys, down payments, closing costs, those are the kinds of things that we could provide. So what we're talking about is working in partnership with the private sector banking system, where typically, like we do for our Hartford Business Revolving Loan Fund, we partner with that. A lot of the underwriting is done by the banks, and this comes in as another funding source to help make that project viable. ARPA dollars are not things that can recycle. They can't be reused as a revolving loan fund, but we've already been in discussions with the revolving loan fund committee about that being another source of income or funds that can actually be infused into the system through the revolving loan fund process. And we do have, so putting that together is looking at, let's see about how we can make this work. Let's partner with other programs at the state level that have funding into the cycle as well. And this can begin to really establish the fact that Hartford is a major area for employment. And in order for us to support that employment, we need to have housing. It's a small start, which may grow into a larger project. So that's sort of where we're at. Obviously, there are deadlines we have to meet for ARPA money in terms of obligations and commitments by the end of 2024, and then expenditures toward the end of 2026. And that's the goal. Our objective is that by the end of this fiscal year, we would have a structure in place that we could begin to roll out.
Okay, great. So we're not deciding this tonight, and this will be part of the budget process, but if there are any questions right now for Laura, that'd be great. Allie?
Yeah, I do have a few, but I know Lanny had his hand up first.
Okay, either way, Lanny.
So a couple of concerns I have with this. First off would be how do we make this equitable over a long-term period? Because if we use this money from ARPA to do this, how are we going to say, yes, you apply this year? How are we going to pick and choose, I guess, who gets these funds for these ADUs this year to apply? And then 2 years down the road, we don't have these ARPA funds and we don't have this revolving loan funds. How are we going to make it equitable for everyone that applies?
So I think in using again the model that we have for the Hartford Business Revolving Loan Fund, which has been in effect for well over 30 years, is that the resources are there on a first come first served basis. But I don't see us having people rushing into the door and having all these people applying at once. It is a process, and people have to be thoughtful about it, just as if somebody's coming in and they want to do an expansion of their business or start a new business. They make a presentation, they go through a vetting process, And then if the funds are available and the select board determines that that's the way it needs to be done, there's a whole process that we go through. And it's worked actually quite well in that it comes along and it also can establish, is this an ongoing need that needs to have additional funds put into the system in order to enable it to happen. But one thing I also want to sort of identify, add on to this, is it's not just the first initial 10 or 15 people that are going to benefit from this. These are permanent housing units that over time are going to be reused and recycled, and they're going to provide the opportunity for new employees coming into town, young families being able to have a place to come and live in Hartford. And these units are going to be recycled over and over and over again. So it's just not 10 or 15 households that are going to benefit from it. Over time, there will be many, many households.
No, there's
that will
10 or
benefit.
15 landowners that are going to benefit from it.
Well, but it's
immensely
the
over a long
same
period
as
of
if
time.
we were having businesses that we want to encourage economic development in town. And we have said, okay, we will invest money in businesses to do that. This is one way in order to help get the necessary housing that we need in there, with a little bit of help to those private sector, private property owners. They're going to create housing that is much needed with a little bit of extra help from the town.
So the very term of business revolving loan fund, I mean, that's we're going to have to rewrite the terms of the business revolving loan fund in order to make this for, I mean, call it some other structure for.
Well, so there are, first of all, there's a flexibility within that, but we also have another revolving loan fund that we, a couple of years ago established that has rules attached to it from the state that it can be used for housing. And actually, if you're looking at the language of the Hartford Business Revolving Loan Fund, stimulating economic development. I've had people approach me who are businesses that want to expand, or they have businesses and they can't hire people because they don't have any place to live and they want to build housing. So we've talked about that as a way in which we will stimulate economic development, and housing is a critical piece of that. I think that we've seen over and over again, at least for the 20 some odd years that I've been here, it's been the conversation. And that's why we have businesses like Mascoma Bank and like Dartmouth and so forth, contributing funds into a regional
I appreciate that.
fund.
I think the bigger concern that I would have of this is if someone applies for these funds to help them create ADUs, what is there for any stipulation or guarantee to the town that these people are not going to use those funds to fix their property, turn it and then use that for a in-law apartment, or sell their property afterwards and increase the sale value of it because they utilize the town funds? What sort of there has to be some sort of a, lack of a better term, a guarantee that you use these funds and you're going to have this, I mean, written into like a deed or something, that these units that we're helping you get are going to be used for a certain number of years. But again, that's going to put constraints on property owners. If the property changes hands, the new property owner doesn't have the right to do with what they want, their own property.
Lord, that's a
those are
good
things that
question,
we're
but-
going to put into play. Those are things that I'm working on right now, and how would those things work? And those are things that I would be coming back to you as the select board as we're rolling out those things. There are many different options of that, but obviously, as it is with many things, if people choose to take on some of the funding options, whether it's us or the state or whatever, and there are agreements that they have to come to, those are things that they knowingly take on when they take on it. So I would be coming back to you with more specifics on those particulars that we're working on right now.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing that worries me, is just giving them money for them to sell their property.
Ally, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I mean, it might just be, you might address this when you come back with more specifics, but so is it helpful to think about the 150,000 of ARPA almost as like startup funds to complement, funds that are coming from Hartford Business Revolving Loan Fund, like something to just essentially get this pilot program off the ground and see how it works?
I think that is a plausible way of viewing it, yes.
Okay, thank you. It's helpful. It's my layperson's.
Heidi, please.
It's helpful
Don't
for my
interrupt people.
layperson's knowledge around this. And so, yeah, maybe this is part piggybacking off of Lanny's question, which sounds like you're still working out. Is just, I do have just curiosities about the administration of it and how that would work, but that might be for a later discussion. And I know we're late in the evening. And then similarly, just have questions around, and maybe if we're thinking about this as, 150K of startup funds, the question of to sustain this program long term might also have to be answered later once we actually see how it runs and what funding sources after, if we do use ARPA, once those funds are expended, how we're, finding those funds. But anyway, so perhaps I'm not answering or asking questions that are timely in the moment, but for later.
Suggest that the board, if you have questions about this, want more information, to send the questions or the request for info to John. You can get some answers from Lori, because we're not deciding this tonight. We have a lot that's going to come back, but if our questions can help Lori sort of shape what she looks into, things like that, that's going to be very helpful. Yeah.
I know you want to move on. I basically just want to share my perspective, and I think I would be curious if there's plans in your regular operating budget to increase staff in the planning department. Because I ask that because while I know adding staff is a very long-term financial commitment, I worry about the capacity of the department, which you guys do amazing, amazing stuff, but I feel like this is basically just taking a little piece of something and adding more work to the department, where what I would rather see is to add a position that is a technical assistant and grant manager or something else in your department just to support the work of the department. And that might include, instead of just this $150,000 for this purpose, helping residents to secure the incentives that are out there throughout the state and federally. So personally, I would rather see the planning department add a position than to just add this one program that's going to just add more work to the department.
Mr. Chair, one sentence.
Yeah.
I would be very difficult to support. I would be hard pressed to support any use of town funds, ARPA or otherwise, in the form of grants. But revolving loan, I think, is a reasonable use.
Thank you, Lori.
Okay.
Commission reports. Kim, do you have any? Dan? Dan, you got any commission reports?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Dan. Ally?
I do. So Hartford Committee on Racial Equity and Inclusion, the chair of the committee, Sarah Campbell, was recently appointed to the school board and appointed as one of the school board's H-Corey liaisons. So the committee will have just a continued discussion around if we need to do a reorganization to appoint a different chair. And the committee had some initial discussions, which will continue around potential budget items to propose for the fiscal year 25 budget, as well as the broadening the scope of the committee charge. And there's one community member vacancy and one student liaison vacancy, so please apply if you're interested. And then Hartford Committee on Housing and Homelessness, we discussed what Lori just overviewed for us now about the proposed use of ARPA funds and that program. We also talked about the Champlain Valley Office of Economic Opportunity, which I'd love to do more research about, which offers support and resources to housing groups and helps them connect. So they could be really great resources. We're trying to have more regional connection and impact. And they also host Fair Housing Month programming, which I believe is in April of 2024. So we can be on the lookout for that and ways to participate. We also, some members took part in the Town Planning Commission, Town Plan Steering Committee meeting to offer some feedback on the draft of the housing chapter for the town plan, which is almost complete. I think there's another community meeting, but that chapter is almost complete, which is exciting. And there are 2 committee vacancies, so please apply if you're interested.
Thank you, Ally. Rocket, do you have anything?
Nothing to report.
Lanny, do you have anything?
Ally, come reach for you. I got nothing.
Okay, I don't have anything. So we will do the consent agenda, but I believe one AP manifest we're not going to approve. So the 10-5 AP manifest. Okay, Kim?
Sure. I Move that we approve payroll ending September 30, 2023, AP manifests of September 29 and September 25 and September 29, 2023. The special check run of September 25, 2023, and meeting minutes of September 19th, 2023.
A second. Second. We have a second from Rocket. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Dan
Aye.
Sines, aye.
Okay, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I will second.
I will second. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. We are adjourned.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, thanks, John.
Thank you.